some coastal parts towards the Irish Sea as well, seeing a few showers. Notice those temperatures a few degrees lower than they have been recently, so feeling cold despite the sunnier skies.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000 in tax-free cash.
My name is Cliff.
And my name is Julie, and we won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's a time for the vegan community to get together, as well as an opportunity for non-vegans to try going plant-based.
Well, joining us now is some of her delicious hummus. We both love hummus. This is a great thing. This is the founder of Chickpea, Hannah McCollum. Hannah, lovely to meet you. And you've brought in some of your beautiful products in front of you here. So can you talk us through some of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a range of chilled hummus, and then latest to the range are a new ambient snack pot, which is a fridgeless hummus that doesn't require refrigeration. But I started Chickpea because of my love for hummus, but also sustainability and reducing food waste and encouraging people to be more plant-based without saying go vegan.
Does normal, say, traditional hummus have anything that's not vegan appropriate in it?
Not really.
No.
I think
it's always chickpeas, olive oil, maybe some other bits.
Yeah, lemon juice, aquafaba or water to help with consistency, garlic, and rapeseed oil or olive oil.
And there's a bit of a misconception about veganism that I hear a lot, where people say, look, I'm not a vegan, I love my steaks, I'll just get out of there now. But there's a misconception that you don't get the protein, you don't get the fats, and you're kind of just eating processed salads and, fake meat and things. But that's not quite the case, especially with chickpeas, right?
Yeah, I think protein is really important, and actually a lot of people think I need a certain amount of fish every week or meat, but actually a lot of the fish and meat that you're eating are eating higher protein foods, so algae, seaweed, pulses, all these types of plant-based foods. For me, veganism is like you could have a delicious rye seeded bread with just loads of roasted vegetables, seeds, tahini sauce on top.
That sounds
and there's nothing beige in there at all.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Happy New Year. It's 12 o'clock on Wednesday, the 1st of January. My name's Tom Harwood. Now over to the United States, where at least 10 people are feared to have been killed after a vehicle struck the crowd celebrating New Year in New Orleans. We're going to bring you the very latest on this developing story throughout the programme. Back in Blighty, Britain rings in the new year in style with a sparkling fireworks display in London, despite a wave of cancellations and weather warnings across the country. And the Prime Minister hails a year of change as he delivers his first New Year's Day message since the general election, with a plan for more cash in your pocket by 2025.
Until you can look forward and believe in the promise and the prosperity of Britain again, then this government will fight for you.
Well, a very happy new year from all of us here at GB News to you, wherever you are and however you celebrate it. Very jealous of those of you who are still in bed, of course. Very jealous of those of you who have had the wise decision to take today off. But this, of course, is Good Afternoon Britain, and we're going to be dancing around the country, looking at all sorts of stories in the run-up to what is going to be a very busy year in terms of news. We're going to be looking at how people celebrated New Year, but we're going to be looking at the more serious stories as well. A complete smorgasbord of news for your New Year's Day. So do send in your views and post your comments by visiting us at gbnews.com/yoursay to get involved throughout the programme. We'll be reading out some of your comments a little bit later in the show. But before all of that, it's time for your very latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 12 o'clock. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. Now, more on that breaking news coming to us from the US. 10 people have been killed after a vehicle ploughed into crowds of people celebrating the New Year in New Orleans. It's understood 30 people have been injured in the incident, which took place on the corner of the popular Bourbon Street in the French Quarter of the city. It's popular with tourists. It happened at around 3 a.m. local time, and we will bring you more on this story as we get it. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has hailed 2024 as a year of change as he shared his first New Year message as Prime Minister. Sir Keir declared that the UK will embark on a year of rebuilding and rediscovering the great nation we are in 2025.
Until you can look forward and believe in the promise and the prosperity of Britain again, then this government will fight for you.
But the Conservatives have accused Labour of offering change for the worse, as Kemi Badenoch used her own New Year message to warn that efforts to turn around Tory fortunes would be bumpy.
Happy New Year. Like all of you, I am looking forward to a 2025 that is full of hope, security and prosperity. The Conservative Party is also going through a period of change. This process of renewal will be a long-term project. Things may be bumpy along the way, but the party I now lead is going to do things differently. Watch this space.
Meanwhile, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage addressed the nation from Blenheim Palace.
You know, the fish rots from the head down. We have been appallingly led in this country now for several decades. We are in societal decline. We are in economic decline. Most people are getting poorer with every year that passes. We're losing any sense of national identity. And we're actually teaching kids at school that people like Winston Churchill, born in this palace, are bad people and that our country's history is something to be ashamed of.
And Sir Ed Davey, the leader of the Lib Dems, also looked back on 2024.
Devastating effects of climate change, from floods to wildfires. So much instability and insecurity, all made worse by Donald Trump's victory in November. But despite all that, I think we can all look forward to 2025 with genuine hope. Hope because I know that UK can rise to these challenges, home and abroad. We have the people, the grit, the talent, the businesses, and the right values to change things for the better.
Britain rang in the new year with a spectacular fireworks display on the banks of the River Thames as London defied weather warnings, which led to cancellations of other events around the country. Strong winds, rain and blizzards meant many fireworks events were cancelled last night in parts of the UK, including Hogmanay in Edinburgh. Fortunately, the bad weather did not put a dampener on London's sold-out New Year's Eve display. Meanwhile, following a stormy New Year's Eve, the wild weather looks set to continue, with London's New Year's Day parade delayed due to high winds forecast. More than 150 flood warnings have been issued across the UK as parts of the country are set to be battered by wind and rain on the first day of 2025. The Met Office has issued yellow warnings for wind and rain for much of Wales, North West England, Yorkshire, the East Midlands and Southern England, while a snow and ice warning has also been issued for Northern Scotland. And domestic energy prices have risen, with more pain for bill payers set to come. The second increase in Ofgem's price cap this winter takes effect today, and it means someone paying by direct debit and using a typical amount of gas and electricity will pay £1,738 a year. That is a £21 a year more increase than under the previous cap. So bill payers are being urged to submit a meter reading to avoid overpaying on estimated usage. Bills are about 50% higher than pre-COVID levels, and analysts predict they will rise by a further 3% in April. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Tom.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 6 minutes past midday on this, the 1st of January. Now, multiple people are feared dead after a massive vehicle charged through a crowd of partygoers in New Orleans in the early hours of this morning. Well, emergency services have said at least 10 people have been killed after a vehicle struck a crowd celebrating the New Year. The incident happened at around 3:15 a.m. on New Year's Day in the United States. The number of injured survivors is still unknown. This is a story that is, of course, developing. We're going to keep tabs on it throughout the programme. But joining me now is the retired Scotland Yard detective, Mike Neville. Mike, this is such a shock, a tragedy, but also, strangely, I think something that perhaps people have become a little numb to, given we saw a very similar event in Germany just a few days ago.
Yes, it's absolutely tragic, Tom, isn't it? On people out celebrating in crowds and these vehicles being turned into weapons. And the reports are, wild. There's also talk of a man getting out with an assault rifle who had a flak jacket on. It's unclear whether anybody's been arrested yet and whether the suspect has been detained. And one of the lessons, I think, from Germany, really, is that the German police were quick to get out information, who the man was, where he was, the information they had. And that was very much at variance with the experience we had in the United Kingdom with the Southport attacks, where the authorities sort of sat on the truth for months and months. And I just think that causes massive amounts of speculation, real fear amongst communities. And I think the American police need to look to the German police about getting information out so the public are assured. But these are terrible things. And Douglas Murray, writing recently, has said that this becomes almost an annual event, something that we expect. And it is a terrible thing that in the West that we are, but people cannot feel safe when they should be having a lovely party.
No, it is a real shocking event. And of course, our thoughts and hearts go out to everyone affected. Some of the images that we've been seeing are truly, truly horrific. But Mike, how does a police service go about trying to keep people safe? Is it possible in the 21st century to keep large events, large celebrations like we've seen in cities the world over? Is it possible to deliver the sort of level of safety that perhaps we would have expected several decades ago?
Well, I think that what we're going to look at now is we live in a very different world. You only have to walk around London and you go over London Bridge and you see the vehicle barriers and the like. One of the flaws out in Germany was that one of the barriers was missing. And so we've got to accept that if we're going to have large, crowded events, those events have absolutely got to be secured, almost with tank traps that people cannot get in there with a vehicle. Because, yes, it'd be very difficult. Somebody could slip in with a pistol or a knife. But vehicles can be stopped. And we know that in events where you can put up those big barriers, that will happen. And I think we've just got to accept that we live in a very evil and wicked world, really. And these things can happen. We've got to expect them. And it's not just the police, of course. It'll be the local authority, the mayor, the people who are responsible for that area. All of them have got to work together to make sure that a crowded area cannot be attacked by vehicles like this.
It is particularly shocking, given we've seen the death toll now reach double figures. It's clearly one of the more significant attacks that America has seen in recent years. What do you think the repercussions to this might be?
Well, I think the Americans, because they until 9/11, of course, things like the IRA were not taken too seriously. Then terrorism came home. People realised in the States how awful the West, and particularly Britain, had suffered from terrorist attacks. And I think it will just, the Five Eyes is the security services of the major nations, the Western nations like Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and America. They'll all be working together to see who this person is. But the key thing for me is to learn how to deal with the public. And too much in the past, the public have almost been lied to. They've been told it's a Norwegian terrorist or somebody who's mentally ill or whatever else. Let's get the truth out there. Let's establish who this person is. And then the public can help to provide information and we can try and stop the people who do this. Because one of the things I would say is that the Counter-terrorism unit at Scotland Yard and beyond, they stopped so many of these incidents ever happening in the first place. These are highly professional officers who never get praised because we never knew that the thing never happened. And so congratulations to them. But the trouble is like the IRA said, we have to be lucky every time. They only have to be lucky once.
It's a profound point. Well, Mike, I think you raised some really, really important points there. Openness, transparency. We will, of course, be crossing back to New Orleans. We're expecting some sort of statement from the authorities during the course of this programme. But for now, Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard detective, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Well, joining me in the studio today, my panel, the editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, and the former Labour advisor, Matthew Larzer. Charlotte, I think we're all hoping to have a bit of a more jolly start to the show than all of this. Really terrible scenes in America.
Yeah, what really touched me is when he said this is an annual event, and it's so true, isn't it? Because now, every year we have Christmas, and then or New Year, and then a horrible thing happens. And that really struck a chord with me. And it's true, we are getting used to stuff like this. And it's just a really actually miserable start to 2025.
Yeah, no, Matthew.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. What a horrible start to the year. But I mean, as Mike was saying, it's interesting about preventative measures that are being taken. I just noticed on the way here that there were a lot more barriers up. Going past some government buildings, they were interestingly sort of on the corner of one government building. There was, it's obviously been identified as a weak point, so there aren't barriers all the way along, but it's a sort of corner section, and there's a new barrier that's just gone across there. And I live very close to the where the fireworks were, and certainly last night there were massively more barriers than there have been in previous years on a lot more streets. So clearly the threat from somebody driving a vehicle into a crowd has been taken very seriously.
Absolutely. It's one of these things where whether it's bombs or assault rifles or anything like that, the authorities can, of course, clamp down on those, and they can stop people accessing these weapons. But no one can stop people having a car, and it just gets to the point. It's like the stabbings that we see in London as well. I mean, you can't stop people having knives. These are useful tools, but then evil people turn everyday tools into weapons.
Yeah, and I think in America as well, you can't really bollard everywhere. What's lucky about London, as you were saying, is, of course, it's a very historic city, so there's lots of small, cobbly roads. I don't know how they're going to bollard these huge roads in America. And, what's sad is that everyday items can be turned into weapons, and you can't really guard against that, except to hopefully reprogram people's minds and hope, to be more peaceful.
Yes, it is sad that, and it's not just London, it's cities across the UK where you've got concrete blocks that are just in front of many of these areas where people congregate. And I wonder if that is going to be proliferated the world over. You'd expect it in New York, you'd expect it perhaps in Los Angeles. I wouldn't have thought that New Orleans would be one of the major flashpoints.
No, it's not a sort of political or commercial centre in quite the same way. It's a party town. So, I mean, I think the other issue is that people always find out the weak spots. So, as we saw in Germany, this wasn't in Berlin, this wasn't in Cologne. This was in a much smaller city, and I wonder if the issue here is that obviously police tackle London, Manchester, Glasgow, but smaller towns and cities are going to have to take this into account in a way you'd never have dreamt. The sort of market towns having a Christmas market or the Christmas light switch on or something. We'd have to start thinking about how do we bollard off car access. I mean, it's pretty grim, isn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't Munich and it wasn't Berlin that got attacked in Germany, but I must say we are hearing now reports that it was a truck. That's the word that Reuters news agency is using. A truck crashing in to a crowded street of partygoers. I mean, really quite horrific. It's easy to see how such a large and heavy vehicle...
Yeah, and also, of course, I mean, if it's a commercial vehicle, sometimes they have access in a way that cars don't because, people can, obviously have to unload, goods from those trucks. So if people are starting to use trucks, then which in some ways can get closer in if they've got the right pass or they say the right thing to the guy with the clipboard, then that's very worrying.
Gosh, I mean, these American vehicles are huge, even their SUVs. I mean, there was some talk that this was an SUV, which is also a truck in America, but anyway. But they're huge, these American vehicles. They're ginormous people carriers, half of them. So I dread to think what it was like seeing the bodies flying around. Sad about it.
I know there's some footage that's been flying around on social media. We're choosing not to show that here on GB News, but these are live pictures currently in New Orleans we've been looking at over the last few minutes that we've been able to see the police response there. And we're expecting likely some sort of statement from the authorities there over the course of the next hour or two. Matthew, you've worked with some of the most senior politicians in the country. Would we expect a political response to this as well as a police statement?
Yeah, I think what we'll see in America is a series of political responses because obviously we'll see them in the state. We'll see the governor of Louisiana at some point make a statement, but then obviously this is at the very end of the Biden presidency. So it's quite possible that the president himself would visit. I mean, of course, one of the big things in America is politicians like to be seen at church services that are often held. Louisiana has a very large African-American community. There'll be which it's traditionally, although the state isn't, New Orleans is a sort of Democrat bastion. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Biden going down and doing actually what he does best, which is just empathising with people. And it's one of the things he actually, whatever else one thinks of him, that he can feel their pain. And sadly, there's a great deal of pain in that city tonight.
Goodness me. Well, it's not the start to the new year that I think any of us would have wanted. We're going to be keeping an eye on this story, of course, throughout the programme, but there's much more besides, and we're going to try and bring some good news as well as the terrible things that are happening in the world. This is, after all, Good Afternoon Britain. Thank you so much, Matthew Laza and Charlotte Griffiths. We'll be, of course, with you throughout the programme. But we're going to turn to domestic news now because the Prime Minister has a New Year's message. Yes, his first message from Downing Street as Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has declared that the UK will embark on a year of rebuilding and rediscovering the great nation we are in 2025.
2024 was a year of change. Not sadly in the football, another agonisingly close shave for England, but changing politics with the election of this Labour government in July. And more importantly, with the work of change that we've begun. The minimum wage raised by a record amount, wages up more broadly, returns of foreign national criminals up 20%, billions of pounds worth of new projects in clean British energy, making our country more secure, and £25 billion invested in our NHS, starting to cut waiting lists in your local hospital. Now, I know there's still so much more to do, and that for many people it's hard to think about the future when you spend all of your time fighting to get through the week. So I want to be clear, until you can look forward and believe in the promise and the prosperity of Britain again, then this government will fight for you.
These things, Well, there was the Prime Minister, but the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, also released a defiant message.
Happy New Year. Like all of you, I am looking forward to a 2025 that is full of hope, security and prosperity. The Conservative Party is also going through a period of change. This process of renewal will be a long-term project. Things may be bumpy along the way, but the party I now lead is going to do things differently. Watch this space.
Goodness me. Well, the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage addressed the nation from Blenheim Palace.
You know, the fish rots from the head down. We have been appallingly led in this country now for several decades. We are in societal decline. We are in economic decline. Most people are getting poorer with every year that passes. We're losing any sense of national identity. And we're actually teaching kids at school that people like Winston Churchill, born in this palace, are bad people, and that our country's history is something to be ashamed of.
And I'm told Nigel Farage delivered that address with no auto-cue, unlike me. But this is Sir Ed Davey, the leader of the Lib Dems. He also looked back on 2024.
Devastating effects of climate change, from floods to wildfires. So much instability and insecurity, all made worse by Donald Trump's victory in November. But despite all that, I think we can all look forward to 2025 with genuine hope. Hope because I know that UK can rise to these challenges at home and abroad. We have the people, the grit, the talent, the businesses, and the right values to change things for the better.
Well, let's dissect these politically now with the editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, and the former Labour advisor, Matthew Larser. Matthew, I'm going to start with you because you used to advise Ed Miliband on all things media, all things television. Would you ever have told Ed Miliband to not wear a suit?
I mean, potentially, yes, but I would have told him to have tucked his shirt in rather better than that. I mean, look, I think we need to be fair to Keir. It's not the greatest shot, and it's not the greatest New Year's message. He's had a pretty grim week. Obviously, his brother's died, and so I think we need to... we'll cut him a little bit of slack. But having said that, I mean, I think the problem that Keir has is he comes across... This is a New Year message. In fact, frankly, I think all three of them were rather over the top for New Year's messages because they've forgotten to be conversational. So one of the big things that I tried to do with Ed is make him more conversational, because people listen. If people are going to engage with a politician, they need to engage as they would a conversation around the breakfast table or around the slightly hungover brunch table this morning. What they don't need is hectoring, and I think all three of them were rather hectoring. I think Nigel was rather over the top and had been delusions of grandeur. You know, he thinks he's Churchill. I think that may be. If I was advising Nigel, I'd watch that. I think Kemi's was fine and it's the most neutral of the three. And I think that when you listen to the whole of the Starmer one, it's a little bit sort of, here's our list of priorities, here's our list of this. It's not talking directly to you. It's not engaging with you as an individual.
Charlotte, you were bristling during that first playback.
Well, I was really unimpressed with Keir Starmer. It's true. I mean, he has lost his brother, but he really needs to just stand up, if nothing else.
Yeah.
I mean, just stand up, wear a tie, and a bit better lighting. I mean, the start of a new year is a time of hope. And he's just kind of looking a little bit miserable in the back office in some broom cupboard. You know, I really wanted to see some positivity from all of those, actually, all of those politicians. And I wasn't really getting it. And I'm afraid Farage looked very statesmanlike. I mean, he's in some stately home wearing an immaculate tie. What a contrast. It's not a clever move from Starmer's team, I'm afraid.
I mean, at least Ed Davey doing it outside with the sun setting behind him. At least it's kind of people who are going for walks at this time of the year. It just feels like he's a normal person.
It did look a little bit washed out, though. A bit grey. Could he have picked the sunrise?
Absolutely. It's sun over Kingston again. Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean about Nigel. Nigel does look prime ministerial. On the other hand, Nigel is, of course, the insurgent. So I think one issue for Nigel is that some of the kind of semiotics, as it were, the kind of signals that the backdrop, that the image that you're sending send. If you're in a sort of red wall seat, Blenheim Palace is a very long way from St Helens, you know, and you can.
But does that matter? Given, of course, we've seen how popular Donald Trump has been with blue-collar America. Donald Trump is the kind of person that sits in lavish palatial buildings, gilded.
I think it's a bit different for sort of somebody who's made their own money rather than sort of, you know, trying to pretend that they're their Churchill by cosplaying Churchill in Blenheim. So, I mean, I think that's... I think looking smart, and Nigel always looks immaculately turned out, is one thing. I think kind of saying, I'm doing it here because, you know, this is where you know, the Churchill family come from, I think is a wee bit over the top, especially, and I think, you know, because if you look at the whole of the images from Nigel over the Christmas period, it was at a hunt. Got to remember, hunting is actually very unpopular. And there are a lot of voters who've never been on a hunt who Reform are going for, because you're talking about sort of lower middle-income voters for whom, you know, tally-ho is the name of the local pub. It's not what they say on Boxing Day.
But of course, to many people, and particularly rural communities, this is sort of the pomp, the tradition, everything that Britain is for. People like seeing horses and red coats and...
They do and they don't. I mean, they quite like a bit of tradition, but the vast majority of people in the country are against hunting. I'm just saying, from, you know, what you're talking about about is everybody's talking about the ceiling for reform, that you get to sort of 20, 21, 22%, and then you kind of hit a ceiling. Obviously, Trump proved that, you can go way past that. But I think the issue for Nigel is he has to appeal to people who are massively lower income, coming from a different world.
But they're also aspirational. I mean, just because you're lower income from a different world doesn't mean you don't aspire to have good things. And I think Starmer's year was really anti-aspiration. And there's no shame in that. OK, so Farage is obviously clearly vastly wealthier than most of us, but he believes in the tradition of England. And that's not a sin, actually. If you're from a lower income family, it doesn't mean you hate him just because he's rich. And that's what Starmer believes, I think, which is why he cuts aspiration wherever he can find it, in case it kind of triggers some sort of PC woke reaction.
I think that's such an interesting point. I've noticed, actually, that sometimes it's the poshest families who wouldn't be seen dead listening to the King's speech on Christmas Day. It's always the people that are perhaps see themselves as better than that. And actually, it's your everyday Brit that likes the monarchy and likes seeing all of that.
No, absolutely. I think it's about getting the balance right, and I think it's what I mean. I think you can easily be defending British traditions, but by also not to be seen exclusively in a world. I mean, Nigel went during the election campaign. I think they launched their manifesto in a working men's club in Merthyr Tydfil in South Wales. Incredibly clever move, right in the heart. Very traditional British thing. But if I was Nigel, I'd have been with a brass band rather than in Blenheim Palace, saying traditional British, but just a different, to tick a lot of different boxes. Because, and similarly with Starmer, I would have tucked my shirt in, because the first thing with Labour politicians is people who, people who want you to be smart because they think you're going to be scruffy.
Or to quote David Cameron, as he said, and I think it was his first Prime Minister's questions when Jeremy Corbyn became Leader of the Opposition, do up your tie, put on a proper suit and sing the national anthem.
And that's actually what Keir did.
Rhetorical tricolon.
Yeah. Absolutely, because Keir took that advice directly, because at Keir's at the party conference, where the national anthem isn't normally sung, it's normally the red flag. The national anthem Jerusalem is a kind of compromise. Yeah. The national anthem has actually been sung under Keir, so Keir did take Cameron advice, literally.
Oh, no, it's interesting actually that we've spoken a lot about Nigel Farage. We've spoken a lot about Keir Starmer. Kemi Badenoch was in the middle there. She's the leader of His Majesty's most loyal opposition. Was it particularly memorable?
It wasn't that memorable. It was quite self-interested because, of course, she had to talk about the Conservative Party and how it's rebuilding itself, whereas Keir's message was about you, the people. So she couldn't really resist sort of referencing the fact that she's rebuilding the Tory Party. But I thought she was quite sassy, and at the end she kind of did like a cheeky kind of winky smile, and I thought it was quite peak Kemi, to be honest.
Yes. But
I quite enjoyed it. It was fine.
Well, this is the interesting thing about Kemi Badenoch, because Marmite to a lot of people, the sort of the bolshiness, the I'll shoot from the hip kind of thing, which is very attractive in some politicians, but it can backfire sometimes. And I think we did see that a little bit last week. I mean, it could go one of either two ways for Kemi Badenoch.
In what way do you mean?
I mean, she could soar to 40% in the polls or crash to Liz Truss levels.
Yeah, it could do. I think 2025 for Kemi is going to be a very big and very exhausting year for her, for sure. And I think we'll find out quite quickly this year where it's going to go for her. So she'll be girdering her loins, I think, for the next few months and weeks.
Well, on that note, while we all girder our loins, Charlotte Griffiths and Matthew Larser, thanks so much for talking through this. We'll be, of course, back with you later on in the programme. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Plenty more to come. Yes, more than 36,000 migrants have crossed the Channel into Britain in 2024. That's 25% higher compared to the 2023 numbers. So we're going to be diving into that after your very latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines at 12:30. More on that breaking news coming to us from the US. 10 people have been killed after a vehicle ploughed into crowds of people celebrating the New Year in New Orleans. It's understood 30 people have been injured in the incident, which took place on the corner of the popular Bourbon Street in the French Quarter of the city, a tourist destination. Reports suggest the driver of the vehicle got out and opened fire on the crowds, with police firing back. It happened at around 3 a.m. local time. We will bring you more on this story as we get it. Sir Keir Starmer has hailed 2024 as a year of change as he shared his first New Year message as Prime Minister. Sir Keir declared that the UK will embark on a year of rebuilding and rediscovering the great nation we are in 2025.
Until you can look forward and believe in the promise and the prosperity of Britain again, then this government will fight for you.
But the Conservatives have accused Labour of offering change for the worse, as Kemi Badenoch used her own New Year message to warn that efforts to turn around Tory fortunes would be bumpy.
Happy New Year. Like all of you, I am looking forward to a 2025 that is full of hope, security and prosperity. The Conservative Party is also going through a period of change. This process of renewal will be a long-term project. Things may be bumpy along the way, but the party I now lead is going to do things differently. Watch this space.
Britain rang in the new year with a spectacular fireworks display on the banks of the River Thames as London defied weather warnings, which led to the cancellation of other events around the country. Strong winds, rain and blizzards meant many fireworks events were cancelled last night in parts of the UK, including Hogmanay in Edinburgh. Fortunately, the bad weather did not put a dampener on London's sold-out New Year's Eve display. Meanwhile, following a stormy New Year's Eve, the wild weather looks set to continue, with London's New Year's Day parade delayed due to high winds forecast. More than 150 flood warnings have been issued across the UK as parts of the country are set to be battered by wind and rain on the first day of 2025. The Met Office has issued yellow warnings for wind and rain for much of Wales, North West England, Yorkshire, East Midlands and Southern England, while a snow and ice warning has also been issued for Northern Scotland. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2548 and 1.2060 euros. The price of gold is £2,094 and 91 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,173 points.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 33 minutes past midday on this New Year's Day. Happy New Year. Well, more than 36,000 migrants crossed the Channel into Britain last year. That's 2024, marking a 25% increase compared to the 2023 figures. The final crossings of the year were carried out on December the 29th, seeing 291 more migrants making their way to the UK from the shores of France across 6 small boats. Well, joining me today to discuss this is the editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, and the former Labour advisor, Matthew Larser. Charlotte, I was under the impression that we now had a Prime Minister who made it one of his missions to smash the gangs. Doesn't seem to be going very well.
No, and in his New Year's speech that he gave, immigration was down at the third point, I think, which was quite disappointing, and he really didn't.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to interrupt you. We've got a statement in New Orleans, which I believe they are setting up for now. Sorry, we will be going to that in a moment. Let's continue with this for now, but we're keeping a close eye on New Orleans, of course. In New Orleans, 10 people have died, many more injured after what is being described as a truck crashed into people celebrating. We're going to bring you that statement imminently. But returning to the small boat situation, Keir Starmer seemed to focus on this.
Yeah, I don't think he emphasised in his New Year's piece to camera, particularly, that it was that much of a priority for him, and I was quite surprised by that. I think he should be all he's talking about for the next, year. And in terms of smashing the gangs at their origin point, it doesn't seem like anything at all has happened on that front. I mean, obviously, because we can see that people are still coming to shores in droves, but there's been no update. He hasn't mentioned it at all. So I'll be hoping that he does do so in January and February.
I suppose, Matthew Larser, that one of the problems here is that you can smash a gang, but another one will pop up. It can be
a bit like whack-a-mole.
Whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, we're going to cross live to New Orleans and get the latest update from law enforcement in Louisiana.
Good morning. First of all, we do know that the city of New Orleans was impacted by a terrorist attack. It's all still under investigation. You'll hear more after me. However, I have been in direct contact with the White House, with Governor Landry, and of course a unified command who is present here. What I'm asking at this time are prayers for those who have lost their lives in the city of New Orleans due to this tragedy. In addition to that, I'm asking the public to stay clear of 8 blocks around Bourbon Street. Stay clear from Bourbon Street, 8 blocks around. Very active, and again, a unified command is in place right now. I'm going to ask Chief Kirkpatrick to give you an update. You're then going to hear from our agent in charge relative to the FBI. So at this time, Chief Kirkpatrick.
Thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to give you as much of the information I possibly can. We are going to give you an update a couple of times today. So we will give you just the basics this morning, all right? We had this event started at about 3:15. It did involve a man driving a pickup truck down Bourbon Street at a very fast pace, and it was very intentional behavior. This man was trying to run over as many people as he possibly could. It was not a DUI situation. This is a more complex and more serious based on the information we have right now. With respect to numbers, we have right now, and as you already know, this could change throughout the day. We do know that there are 26 injured people who are at UMC Hospital. We know we have 4 at Turo, 4 at Ochsner Baptist, 1 at Tulane, but even as I was walking out the door, I believe I have an unconfirmed additional people who have been taken to other area hospitals, possibly on the east side. But we will give you as many correct numbers as we can as the day progresses. It is a very tragic situation for me to tell you that we know we have 10 people that this man killed on Bourbon Street. That is why we do not want anyone on Bourbon Street today. Wherever you see yellow tape, please do not violate this tape. This is in order to protect and stabilize the scene. We have information to a certain degree of the demographics of those who are in the hospital right now. We do not know at this point how many could be tourists versus locals, but from the information I have right now, it seems the majority are locals versus tourists. What I also can tell you is that this man, this perpetrator, he fired on our officers from his vehicle when he crashed his vehicle. 2 of our officers have been shot. They are stable, and we will give you an update on them. I have yet been able to go to the hospital. I will be leaving here for us to go visit our officers. We have called in every officer that we have. We have so much appreciated our partnerships who have also offered us staff. Last night, we had over 300 officers out here. And because of the intentional mindset of this perpetrator who went around our barricades in order to conduct this. He was hell-bent on creating the carnage and the damage that he did. Because of the nature and the indices that we have on the scene, and we have enough information that the FBI will be taking over this investigation. And with that, I am going to be asking, this is the assistant agent in charge, this is Agent Duncan, Special Agent Duncan, and she has taken over this case on behalf of us and the FBI. As always, we will be in partnership with all of our partners, but Agent Duncan, if you want to have a few words for Lisa.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning. My name is Alethea Duncan. I'm the Assistant Special Agent in charge for FBI New Orleans. As Chief Kirkpatrick said, we'll be taking over the investigative lead for this event. This is not a terrorist event. What it is right now is their improvised explosive devices that was found, and we are working on confirming if this is a viable device or not. As Chief Kirkpatrick said, we're asking everyone to stay away from Bourbon Street, specifically from Canal Street to St. Anne. That is my ask. Once again, stay away from Bourbon Street, Canal Street, all the way to St. Anne until we can figure out what is going on. Our goal is to provide you additional information at the 11 a.m. press conference. Thank you so much, and we will be in touch.
Yes. I will say that we want our community and our visitors to continue enjoying. There's so much to enjoy about New Orleans, and we are going to make sure that our routes in the Superdome are safe today for the game, and yet we had this tragic event, and we're sorry again to everyone in our community. But we do want you to go about the day, as we say, just stay away from Bourbon. Okay?
Can she elaborate on the device? She did say something about the device.
We actually are not going to be taking questions this morning until we have more information. That's why we will give you an 11 o'clock briefing. So until then, please hold your questions. We will give you everything that we possibly can, okay? So 11 o'clock, we will see you at the headquarters, and we will go again from there, okay? No questions, no questions right now.
Right? The device is confirmed?
Well, we've been listening to Anne Kirkpatrick, the superintendent there in New Orleans, responding to what has variably been described as a terrorist attack and not a terrorist attack. Still, many things unknown about this incident. We heard from Special Agent Duncan of the FBI that there were improvised explosive devices found in the pickup truck that ploughed into groups of revellers. We heard that that truck went around the barriers that were set up to protect revellers over New Year's in New Orleans. And we heard that the man who drove this pickup truck ploughed it into that crowd. He had a gun and he fired on officers, police officers, two of whom are in hospital. This was a high-speed event that was described as intentional. Intentional is the word used by Anne Kirkpatrick, the superintendent there. There's a lot to digest here. With me in the studio are my panel. Charlotte Griffiths, this is more serious, if anything, the more it develops.
It's getting more serious by the minute. I mean, if they can't work out whether it's a terrorist or not, I'm kind of quite surprised about that, but it seems to me it probably is. The fact they're explosives, thank goodness they didn't go off. And now officers shot as well. I mean, these are the three worst things that can happen, have happened, all happening in one event. So it's going to send shockwaves through America.
Complete shockwaves. We're hearing that there'll be a more full press conference at 11 a.m. New Orleans time. That's 5 p.m. UK time. So some time to wait before journalists get a chance to answer questions. But Matthew Laza, they are getting out there quickly and delivering actually quite a bit of information about what happened, just not so much about the perpetrator.
Absolutely. What happened, not who the perpetrator is. I mean, of course, in America, terrorism is often referred to what they call domestic terrorism, which is things like the Oklahoma bombing that we saw. Sometimes it has a slightly different context to the British context, where we tend to think of it as people with agendas linked more to international, events and international causes. So, we don't know if it's a sort of what we would here call right-wing terrorism. It's like they call domestic terrorism there in terms of somebody who wants to damage this state. I mean, of course, it's an interesting choice of target because this is not going into a government building. This is innocent people in a city that's known for its party atmosphere. So as you say, although we're beginning to get a picture of what happened, I think the problem is that in an age, as we heard earlier from Mike Neville, the former police officer, in an age of social media, the speculation about who will just be going absolutely insane as the rest of America wakes up.
I'll be really interested to see if, because of social media, if Elon Musk or Donald Trump start tweeting about it irresponsibly, potentially, because in an age of social media, very important people like Trump, who, as we know, flies off the handle left, right and centre, could start adding fuel to the fire. So I hope he doesn't.
And he won't want to miss out either, will he, knowing his personality? He'll want to be part of the story.
And you better believe in 20 days' time he's going to be all over this.
Well, there'll be much more, no doubt, developing throughout the programme on this. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind we will learn more facts about this terrible incident before that 5 p.m. press conference. But much more to get through on today's show. Indeed, we're going to be around the country because people have been celebrating New Year's in very different ways, in very different places. Stay with us.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Joined by international life coach Cheryl Findlay, who has joined forces with a Liverpool business owner, Kate Hill, of sustainable sportswear brand Lola Star, to empower women and inspire women across the nation. And to celebrate this partnership with the new Lola Star collection, the two will be hosting an exclusive event next Saturday.
The sportswear brand was launched after, well, your story. You lost how much weight?
So 16 stone, which is over £220, which I know is quite significant. But during that kind of decade-long journey, I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about what it takes to be successful, to be happy, to be well, and to just live an incredible life every day.
Are you giving them goals to work towards or helping them structure their life?
Yeah, so I don't give out goals, absolutely not. It's all about whatever an individual wants. So what we do to begin with is we understand, like, where are you now? Where are you thriving? Where do you feel really happy and excited in your life? And what's lacking? Like, where would you like to feel better? Where would you like to improve? And then we take it from there.
I'd love to take that on board. I'd love to be my true self and fulfil my potential. So have you got any practical tips on how to do that?
Yeah, so we start with clarity, right? Like, you need to know, it's such a busy, fast-paced world we live in. There's so much sensory overload. You know, it'd be so easy to be distracted. So we need to kind of quiet all that noise down and start with, where do I want to focus? Pick 2 or 3 things. Where do I want to focus? And then we define the goal. What would I like that area of my life to look, not just look like, but feel like? And then we take it from there. So that's where you would start. I actually had a cancer diagnosis in 2019. And I just decided if I was going to be lucky enough to be on the other side of it, I wasn't going to play small anymore.
GB News, the People's...
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just coming up to 10 to 1, and we're going to return to our top story today, a developing story throughout this afternoon. Multiple people are feared dead after a large vehicle charged through a crowd of partygoers in New Orleans. Emergency officials have said that at least 10 people have been killed after this vehicle struck the crowd celebrating the New Year. The incident happened at around 3:15 local time on New Year's Day. The number of injured survivors is still unknown. Well, we've been hearing from some of the local authorities. We've been hearing from the Mayor of New Orleans, LaToya Cantrell. We've been hearing from the superintendent, the police superintendent, Anne Kirkpatrick. She listed many hospitals, at least 5 different hospitals where survivors have been taken and where people are being treated. She did not have a full list. We do not have a full number of those who have been hurt, but we know at least 10 people are dead. Well, with me is my panel, the editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, and the former Labour advisor, Matthew Larzer. Matthew, this is not the start to the new year that I think anyone would want. It's not what we would like to be discussing here. But the more we learn about this story, the more serious it becomes.
Absolutely. I think it's gone from being, in a sense, we hear about the kind of school shootings that we hear about in America. We sort of slightly discount, because there's so many of them. They're obviously tragic incidents, but they're kind of localised. This, I think, is going to have massive national implications, especially as the scale of the death toll and the toll of injured people as well. But also, if it does turn out that what the motives of the person doing it were. I mean, again, we don't want to overly speculate, but it was 3 o'clock in the morning. It was a party crowd. Could it be somebody, who had a grievance against particular groups of people? We just don't know yet. But there's clearly going to be a lot more that's going to emerge.
There certainly is. And Charlotte, it's interesting. There have been several high-profile shootings and attempted assassinations in the United States. Thinking to the assassination of the United Healthcare boss, we learnt so much about the suspect so quickly because he had so much of a social media presence. But if we think to the shooter, the attempted assassin of Donald Trump, we know virtually nothing about that man.
Yeah, even still now. I'm amazed, actually, that we haven't found anything out about today's... I want to call him a shooter, but he's a driver, I suppose.
He had a gun as well. Well, I mean, the remarkable thing is a gun, improvised explosive devices, and this pickup truck.
It's amazing that they haven't tried to tell us anything about this person, but I suppose they're very nervous in this day and age about causing kind of an internet sensation, and people will start speculating about their nationality or their heritage. But I actually think, as your commentator said earlier, that in the void of information, speculation can... I mean, I haven't checked Twitter in the last 10 minutes, but I bet you it's going off. And I really think they actually should inform people as soon as possible in these situations. They must have an idea what this man looks like, or woman. Well, and I'd be interesting to know his age as well, or their age, because... I just wonder whether social media has such an influence on these people.
So the FBI has confirmed it's a man.
OK, yeah.
But we don't know the age. We don't know anything. We don't know if he is dead or alive.
Yeah, I'm amazed they haven't been able to tell us that, because clearly there's an answer. They know the answer. I just wonder what they're keeping back from us, I have to say. Perhaps it's going to be a bigger geopolitical issue. Who knows?
But of course, we have had this preliminary statement both from LaToya Cantrell, the Mayor of New Orleans, from Anne Kirkpatrick, the Superintendent of the Police Department there, and Special Agent Duncan of the FBI, because the FBI have taken over this case, which leads suggestions that there is more to investigate there. We're going to be updating you on this story throughout the show here on Good Afternoon Britain, but there's plenty more to come, including a look at the latest weather. Don't go anywhere.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Over the next few days, things will turn much colder across the UK. There'll be plenty of sunshine around, but some snow and ice in places as well. Low pressure's moving away to the south and east of the UK now, taking wind and rain with it, allowing a northerly airstream to become established across the UK, and this will introduce some wintry hazards as we go through the coming few days. Wet and windy weather then clearing away to the southeast as we go through the evening. Some wintry showers across the central slice of the UK, also easing as we go through the overnight period. So showers becoming mainly confined to areas exposed to the north to northwesterly airstream. And again, those showers will be wintry in places, especially across the hills towards the north, but to some lower levels in places as well. A widespread frost forming, temperatures in towns and cities below freezing, down to -7 or -8 in a few parts of Scotland, and there'll be some ice around to start the day on Thursday as well. So starting Thursday then, further wintry showers moving in from the north into the northern parts of Scotland, a mixture of hail, sleet and some snow in places. Southern parts of Scotland mostly fine to start the day, some clear weather but very chilly here, some frost and some ice in places. A few wintry showers into Northern Ireland, southern parts of Northern Ireland seeing the best of the quieter weather to start the day here. A few showers also across the Irish Sea areas, down across North Sea coastal areas of eastern England, but elsewhere lots of sunshine around, and that's the way of things as we go through Thursday. There will be plenty of sunshine, certainly across inland areas, but it will be a cold day wherever you are with a north to northwesterly wind blowing, and further showers feeding down in that north to northwesterly airstream, particularly into northern Scotland, down across parts of Northern Ireland, the west of England, and down some North Sea coasts at times too. Temperatures are at the very best up to 6 or 7 degrees, but add on the effect of that north to northwesterly wind and feeling close to, if not below freezing in one or two places. As we go into the evening, the showers will tend to become more and more confined to those coasts, so a frost and some ice forming again as we go into the overnight period. Again, a very cold night developing, and we hold on to a mixture of sunshine and wintry showers on Friday, with a risk of some more persistent rain and some snow moving in from the southwest as we go into the weekend. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's still plenty of time to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever, an incredible £50,000. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion? For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Millions are struggling to stay warm with the wet weather, the cost of living and, of course, cuts to fuel payments.
Yes, winter is fast approaching, so it's crucial to find cost-effective ways to save on your energy expenses whilst staying reasonably warm.
So joining us to provide advice on heating your home, or at least staying warm somehow, is one of the leading voices on lowering energy bills, Nick Miles. And you are very welcome in here this morning. I mean, a lot of people would say, well, in the olden days, you just used to put on an extra jumper. But actually, it's more serious than that, isn't it? What is the best way, the most cost-effective way to keep your home warm?
Some of the bigger things is we need to do more things on insulating our properties, but actually sometimes, it can be simple things like turning down a thermostat. Those that have got the luxury of being able to afford energy bills and keep their homes on the thermostat a bit too high. If you just turn it down by one simple degree, as long as you keep it between 18 and 22 degrees, can save up to 5 to 10% of your energy bill. So that's a kind of a very simple way of doing things, but it can be other little tips and tricks you can do as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I always get it when people say about this, but like 18 degrees is not warm for a house.
No, and it's twofold actually. It's that kind of relative temperature, but also it's the kind of drafts and things you have in your house. So it's the comfort factor. So what we have a lot of old properties in our country. You've got some 8 million hard-to-treat properties built before World War II that have got poor insulation, but also very, very drafty. So it's the temperature and it's the kind of the draftiness of them that kind of keeps us uncomfortable.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 1st of January. Happy New Year. I'm Tom Harwood. Now over to the United States, where at least 10 people have been killed and 35 injured after a vehicle struck a crowd celebrating New Year in New Orleans. We're getting more information about this developing incident all the time. Stay with us. We'll bring you the very latest. And back in Blighty, Britain rings in the new year in style with a sparkling fireworks display in London, despite a wave of cancellations and weather warnings across the country. Elsewhere, Sir Keir Starmer hails a year of change as he delivers his first New Year message as Prime Minister, with a plan for more cash in your pocket in 2025.
Until you can look forward and believe in the promise and the prosperity of Britain again, then this government will fight for you.
Believe him? Elsewhere, Labour's controversial tax raid affects private schools. That takes effect today. Across the country, reportedly, private schools are increasing their fees by more than the government predicted. Now, of course, throughout the show today, there are many stories to cover, but one dominates, and it quite rightly dominates the developing situation in New Orleans, in Louisiana, in the United States. We're hearing, of course, that a man, and it's been now confirmed to be a man, we don't know the age of this individual, but we do know that he drove a pickup truck at speed at a crowd of revellers. He then exchanged gunfire with the police, shooting 2 police officers in New Orleans. And there have also been improvised explosive devices found in his vehicle. Thankfully, they have not gone off. This is a major incident, and we'll be covering it throughout the show. Want your thoughts, though? Do get involved at gbnews.com/your say to join the discussion. All of that to come after your very latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 1 o'clock. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. Now to that breaking news coming to us from the US, as you've been hearing. 10 people have been killed after a vehicle ploughed into crowds of people celebrating the New Year in New Orleans in what the local mayor called a terrorist attack. At least 35 people have been injured in the incident, which took place on the corner of the popular Bourbon Street in the French Quarter of the city, a tourist destination. Local police have been giving an update and saying the pickup truck was driven at a very fast pace and very intentional behaviour and not a drink driving incident. The driver of the vehicle got out and opened fire on police, with 2 officers shot, but they're in a stable condition now. Improvised explosive devices were also found in the vehicle. It happened at around 3 a.m. local time, and people are being asked to stay away from the scene. Sir Keir Starmer has hailed 2024 as a year of change as he shared his first New Year message as Prime Minister. Sir Keir declared that the UK will embark on a year of rebuilding and rediscovering the great nation we are in 2025.
Until you can look forward and believe in the promise and the prosperity of Britain again, then this government will fight for you.
But the Conservatives have accused Labour of offering change for the worse, as Kemi Badenoch used her own New Year's message to warn that efforts to turn around Tory fortunes would be bumpy.
Happy New Year. Like all of you, I am looking forward to a 2025 that is full of hope, security and prosperity. The Conservative Party is also going through a period of change. This process of renewal will be a long-term project. Things may be bumpy along the way, but the party I now lead is going to do things differently. Watch this space.
Meanwhile, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage addressed the nation from Blenheim Palace.
You know, the fish rots from the head down. We have been appallingly led in this country now for several decades. We are in societal decline. We are in economic decline. Most people are getting poorer with every year that passes. We're losing any sense of national identity. And we're actually teaching kids at school that people like Winston Churchill born in this palace are bad people and that our country's history is something to be ashamed of.
And Sarah Davey, the leader of the Lib Dems, also looked back on 2024.
Devastating effects of climate change, from floods to wildfires. So much instability and insecurity, all made worse by Donald Trump's victory in November. But despite all that, I think we can all look forward to 2025 with genuine hope. Hope because I know that UK can rise to these challenges at home and abroad. We have the people, the grit, the talent, the businesses, and the right values to change things for the better.
Meanwhile, Britain rang in the new year with a spectacular fireworks display on the banks of the River Thames as London defied weather warnings, which led to the cancellation of other events around the country. Strong winds, rain and blizzards meant many fireworks events were cancelled last night in parts of the UK, including Hogmanay in Edinburgh. Fortunately, the bad weather did not put a dampener on London's sold-out New Year's Eve display. In other news, domestic energy prices have risen, with more pain for bill payers set to come. The second increase in Ofgem's price cap this winter takes effect today, and it means someone paying by direct debit and using a typical amount of gas and electricity will pay £1,738 a year. That's a £21 a year more increase than under the previous cap, so bill payers are being urged to submit a meter reading to avoid overpaying on estimated usage. Bills are about 50% higher than pre-COVID levels, and analysts predict they will rise by a further 3% in April. And data has now been extracted from the black box from the doomed Jeju airplane disaster that killed 179 people. The data from the cockpit voice recorder will now be converted into an audio file, with a second black box, a flight data recorder, being sent to the US for analysis. Investigators hope the information they find will provide insights about the crucial moments leading up to the tragedy. All 175 passengers and 4 of 6 crew were killed on Sunday when the passenger jet crash-landed at Muan International Airport and slammed into a sand and concrete embankment at the end of the runway, where it burst into flames. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 7 minutes past 1. Happy New Year. Now we're going to head straight to the United States because multiple people are feared dead after a massive vehicle charged through a crowd of partygoers in New Orleans. Yes, emergency officials have said at least 10 people have been killed after a vehicle struck a crowd celebrating the new year. The incident happened at around 3:15 a.m. local time on New Year's Day. The number of injured survivors is unknown. Well, the mayor of New Orleans, LaToya Cantrell, had this to say.
The city of New Orleans was impacted by a terrorist attack. It's all still under investigation. You'll hear more after me. However, I have been in direct contact with the White House, with Governor Landry, and of course a unified command who is present here. What I'm asking at this time are prayers for those who have lost their lives in the city of New Orleans due to this tragedy. In addition to that, I'm asking the public to stay clear of 8 blocks around Bourbon Street. Stay clear from Bourbon Street, 8 blocks around. Very active, and again, a unified command.
Well, next to speak was Police Superintendent Anne Kirkpatrick. She told reporters how many casualties they're dealing with.
It is a very tragic situation for me to tell you that we know we have 10 people that this man killed. We have information to a certain degree of the demographics of those who are in the hospital right now. We do not know at this point how many could be tourists versus locals. but from the information I have right now, it seems the majority are locals versus tourists. And because of the intentional mindset of this perpetrator who went around our barricades in order to conduct this, he was hell-bent on creating the carnage and the damage that he did.
Well, responsibility for dealing with this case has now turned to the FBI. And Special Agent of the FBI, Alethea Duncan, had this to say.
This is not a terrorist event. What it is right now is their improvised explosive devices that was found, and we are working on confirming if this is a viable device or not.
Curiouser and curiouser. Well, joining me now is the former senior military intelligence officer, Philip Ingram. Philip, there's some confusion here as to whether or not this is being treated as a terrorist incident. We heard from the Mayor, LaToya Cantrell, saying this is a terrorist incident, and then Special Agent Duncan of the FBI said it was not. Why do you think there's this discrepancy?
In the early stages after such a tragic incident like this, you're getting to the motivation of the individual behind it is complex, and it doesn't matter whether the motivation was terrorism or the motivation was some other reason. The result has been the same: 10 people dead, at least 35 injured, and those numbers could go up through the day. The labelling of it will enable the law enforcement agencies to bring in additional resources, but actually the most important thing is to try and identify if this individual's working alone, if there's the potential for other incidents around the place, so that they can prevent further tragedies. And of course, there's no indication that the perpetrator has been arrested or killed yet. So that didn't come out in the press conference that we heard.
Yes, that was very, very strange. We heard so much about what had happened in the past, but not anything to do with this individual, other than he was a man. He shot 2 police officers, but we don't know if he's been apprehended or not. We don't know if he's dead or alive. We don't know where he is. I mean, what do you think that suggests?
Well, there's clear confusion now. 3 o'clock in the morning when this happened in a crowded street, the first instinct of the first responders that are going in are to try and deal with the casualties. 2 police officers shot, so the police had clearly cornered him at some stage. But then, the level of response that's needed to try and secure such a busy area, it would be easy for a perpetrator to potentially slip away. But we don't know at the moment, and that is typical of this sort of incident. It's very, very easy to speculate on very little information, but the bottom line is it's all speculation. We really don't know. We need to wait until the promised outputs and further updates later on today. I think it's at 11 o'clock New Orleans time is when the next formal press announcement is going to be made.
Yes, and that would be 5 p.m. GMT. It seems quite a long time away. In your experience, do you think we'll learn quite a bit more before that formal press conference in New Orleans?
We will. There's lots more going to come out on social media through the day. And the police are concentrating on trying to find the perpetrator, if the perpetrator is still around. Make sure the area is secure from an evidential perspective, and try and confirm whether the individual's been working alone or not. He's clearly come very well prepared. He's chosen a big truck. He's come armed because he's shot the police officers. There have been these suspected improvised explosive devices that the FBI are having to deal with. So they're dealing with a live risk at the moment. That has to be their priority, as well as getting the casualties to hospital, and making sure that there aren't any other casualties that they found, and to try and then keep the rest of the public safe. Then they'll piece together why it's happened, how it's happened, and the motivations behind it.
When you put it like that, this live risk, it does sound very frightening. I mean, there is a lot that we don't know, but frankly, there'll be a lot that the law enforcement officers, that the FBI, that the authorities in the United States don't know as well. And as you mentioned, there is, of course, this risk of either copycats or that this is part of a wider operation.
Well, yes, and this could be a copycat of the tragic attack that we saw in Magdeburg in Germany on the 21st of December, where 5 people were tragically killed and 200 injured. It's surprising to hear that the injuries are only in the sort of the mid to upper 30s at the moment, and that could well go up. But what we tend to find is with attacks like this, they do tend to stimulate other attacks around the place. This is why what shocked me was the chief of police turning around saying the individual drove around the barriers that they had in place. Well, that tells me that the barriers weren't sited properly. And it's getting back to basics and looking after what in the UK we describe as publicly accessible locations. We are waiting for a new piece of legislation to enable us to do that. And that's Martin's Law that has just had its 3rd reading in the House of Commons. But that was only brought in after the tragic attack in Manchester in 2017. It's taken years before we get legislation mandating security in public areas.
Really, really fascinating, this. And as you say, we will be learning more and more as the day goes on. But for now, Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer, thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Now, with me in the studio is the chairman of Republicans Overseas, Greg Swenson. Greg, tell us a bit about New Orleans and Louisiana.
Yeah, it's very much a party town. It's known for its nightlife. When it said 3 a.m., that's not unusual. So it's not like, it's not like it was empty at 3 in the morning like a lot of cities would be. It's very crowded. It's also the weekend of the Sugar Bowl, the big football game, number 2 Georgia versus number 5 Notre Dame. It's a big sports event, and of course New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. So you'll see 75,000 people at the Superdome tonight. That's probably one of the reasons, and I think Philip alluded to it, that one of the reasons they might be somewhat quiet about the perpetrator, to make sure there is no copycat, to make sure they're really focusing on tonight. So even though they can clear out New Orleans, which has got this it's kind of like Times Square, a really dense downtown party district. And if they clear that out, that's fine, but you've got 74,000 people going to the game tonight.
Greg, as you've been speaking, we can see live pictures here of the scene in New Orleans. Completely empty. They've cleared the place. They've clearly erected barriers. We heard the mayor, LaToya Cantrell, saying, stay away from this area. But ordinarily, this would be incredibly busy.
Yeah, even during the day. It's around noon at this time or whatever, 11 a.m., 12 a.m. It's early there. Well, sorry, it's 7 a.m. or whatever, 6, 7 a.m. now. So that would be typically quiet, but New Orleans goes all night. So you'd start to see tourists come in the morning, after the partying ends, and especially New Year's weekend. So that's something that you rarely see, that picture. Because it is such a tourist destination.
Now, you're talking about this football game tonight, a huge, huge cultural event, many tens of thousands of people. Yeah. Do you think there's any chance that will be cancelled or simply much greater security?
I think just much greater security. People have football games, sporting events have been really secure for the last, really since 9/11, for the last 25 years. So I'd be surprised if they didn't elevate it somewhat, that's for sure. I don't think they'd cancel it. It's a night game, so it's not going to be on for another, 18 hours or so. So it's important that people use their heads, and it's important that, security is elevated. But they're typically really secure anyways. Metal detectors at every gate, much like events here, but even more so. And it's a high-profile game. It's the part of the college football playoffs. My daughter went to Notre Dame. She was going to go to the game. I'm so glad she didn't now. So it's a big deal.
Goodness me. Well, the mayor of New Orleans has said she's been in touch with the White House this morning. What do you suspect the political response to this will be?
Well, it depends who the perpetrator was, because there's always a political angle to it, and that might be another reason why they haven't indicated or announced, who it is, because they want to make sure there's no copycats. They want to make sure it's a lone wolf, but also there are political implications here. You saw this during the defund the police movement, the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020 and 2021, when if there was a Christmas market where someone drove a pickup truck down the street, but the perpetrator was African American, most of the victims were white, it was in Wisconsin, and you didn't hear much about it. And so they're very careful about who's involved and if there are political or implications that blame could be assigned on one group or the other. So they just have to be careful, and I think that's wise.
Yeah, we don't know the race of the perpetrator.
No.
All we know that it's a man, but this is quite an African-American area.
Generally speaking, yes, it is. And it's also, coincidentally, a very high crime area. I mean, New Orleans is a smaller city, but it often ranks number 1 or number 2 in homicides per capita. So it's a really dangerous town. But Bourbon Street, downtown, yeah, it can be unsafe for pickpockets and bar fights, but it's a relatively, it's a touristy area, so it is well protected. As the police superintendent pointed out, there were 300 policemen there last night. So this is not a police problem, which we've had a lot of in big, especially in big Democrat cities the last few years with the defund the police movement. There's just fewer policemen. There's fewer resources. I don't think that was the case last
It seems like it was adequately resourced, but there is just this, when you face something as well planned as this appears to
There's
be,
nothing you could do.
It's very hard to see how this could have been stopped, and that's very sad in terms of how we approach policing, security for, frankly, major cities all around the world now.
Yeah, because you don't want to remove the freedom of movement and the freedom for people to gather for events. And it's a shame, but it just shows you how vulnerable we are in the West to terrorist attacks. And that's clearly what this was.
Well, we're going to broaden this discussion out. I'm delighted to say that my panel is still with me. Matthew Laza, Charlotte Griffiths. I mean, we are learning more as this goes on. But Matthew, your general impression from what we heard in the press conference from those 3 figures of authority that we heard just some moments ago?
Well, I think as Greg was saying, what we're seeing is a very clear attempt to not put information out there until that information is confirmed. I think, as Greg was saying, they've got the football match later on in the day. It is still early in the States, and therefore I think that what they're trying to do is not offer information. Now, how long that is sustainable once the country starts to wake up across the vast USA, and then social media gets traction, speculation increases, they then become an issue itself. So I think we're in a holding pattern at the moment, but how long that can last, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, and I should say that we're looking at live pictures now of the scene, what ordinarily would be a party street. Clearly a very heavy police presence, people in New Orleans being told to stay away from the entire area. Police cordons clearly have been set up there. Charlotte Griffiths.
I would stay away from the entire area because we don't yet know whether the suspect's been apprehended. I mean, it's absolutely terrifying. You have to assume he has been, because otherwise they'd put the whole place on lockdown. And also because the IED devices didn't go off, it sounds to me like if there were 300 police officers, maybe they got to him, thankfully, before he had a chance to detonate those devices. But I'm actually gobsmacked that they haven't said whether he's dead or alive.
Yes, very, very curious. But indeed, I suppose there's the other risk that if there were a couple of IEDs or one IED in his car, might there be explosives planted around the general area? That has got to be a risk, something that people are thinking about. No wonder the cordon is up, but my goodness me, I fear for the police officers who are enforcing that cordon, if that is a real risk. Do stay with us. We've got much more to cover throughout this show, and any developments that we find, we will bring them, of course, live to you here on Good Afternoon Britain, developing situation there in New Orleans. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and there's plenty more to come on today's show, including a taxing times for the independent sector in our schools.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
The Daily Mail now, Josh, and pub landlords have to worry about more than the optics when it comes to offensive banter,
Yeah,
it
this
seems.
is a really big story and important. Pub landlords could have to become banter cops to stop themselves being sued by staff offended by comments from customers under workers' rights reform. So, Labour, when they were part of their election process, they were like, we're going to reform workers' rights, and that all sounds good on paper, but there were issues in terms of how might it affect employees and fear from employees costing them more money. One of these things that they're sort of pushing through, though, is that in the Equality Act of 2010, part of the issue was that if you were offended at work or someone said something sexist or racist, something that affected you, the employer had to take some sort of, they had three chances to kind of take action. Yeah. Now, the employer has to should have taken action already. So employees can sue employers. Now, this has a big impact on us because we're comics and we perform in venues. And if some of the bar staff hear a joke that they don't like, then they can sue their employer, potentially, under this legislation.
So it's not punters?
Well, also, it could be like you're at a bar and some bloke is like, oh, I like that top, darling, or whatever. That's not good behaviour. But the point is now that employee could sue their employer.
So, because, I mean, the sort of scenario I was imagining was that a barmaid was being maybe sexually harassed or
That's
something.
what they're focusing in this article, but other articles have gone down the free speech route. Okay. And also venues and universities having lectures. We saw it at, in Edinburgh Fringe Festival and Sadowitz. He had a show cancelled not because of any punters, but because two of the 18-year-olds were working. They were upset by his
There was
wedding.
a bar in Brighton, wasn't there? There was a story we covered a few weeks ago. A bar in Brighton threw some people out because...
exactly. They had turfs on the...
turfs. Yeah. GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 26 minutes past 1. Now, it's a new year, and that means new policies, although perhaps not new Labour. Yes, the government's controversial tax raid takes effect on private schools. Across the country, these independent schools are reportedly increasing their fees by more than the government predicted. Well, let's get to the bottom of this. Joining me now is the head teacher at LVS Ascot, Christine Cunliffe. Christine, thanks for being with us in the studio. Normally we speak down the line, but I suppose, given it's New Year's Day, school's not in session.
Absolutely.
This is, of course, a tax that has hit schools. To some extent, it will hit the smaller independent schools more than it will hit the Eatons and the Winchesters of this world.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to remember that it is a tax on parents. It's actually not a tax on schools. So our parents are being taxed on already tax-paid money that they are choosing in education for their children. And it's not a one-size sector. We have so many small schools, faith schools, schools for children with special needs, and they are the schools that are really going to suffer because of this policy.
Now, clearly the Treasury expected that not all of the tax rise would be passed on to fees, that schools would make cuts or change their budgets in other ways. But the data that we're starting to see now seems to suggest that actually this 20% rise is being passed on to parents.
Yeah, because that's the 20% is the VAT. And as you say, many of the schools have already set their budgets, and a lot of schools cannot work on a finer budget. They cannot pass those costs on. It's very misguided of the government to think that small schools in particular can pass on that amount of discount to their parents.
I've got to ask, are you seeing pupils drop out of your school? Are you seeing parents really struggle here?
100%. And we were at 8% down in September anyway, by children that just didn't come to us. So I think that's a hidden number that you don't see. And then we have parents that have given notice to finish at the end of last term in December. And I think we will see a further drop as well.
You've had some parents take their children out of your school midway through the academic year.
Yeah, so they will come out in January. And this is the effect that we're not seeing. And the thing is, the general public are being told that this is a tax break for schools. It's not. We've never been taxed on education before. It doesn't happen in the world. In fact, some private schools are actually subsidised. The teachers are paid by the state. So this is a tax on parents for choosing an independent education.
Well, let's broaden this discussion out now. With me, former Labour advisor Matthew Larser is here in the studio along with Charlotte Griffiths. Matthew, I find it very hard to understand why the Chancellor has introduced this midway through the term, meaning that some children will have their education disrupted, having to leave midway through a school year.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm broadly supportive of the policy. I probably wouldn't have done it midway through the school year. I think it would have made much more administrative sense. I mean, the sums being raised are not insignificant, but they're not so vast that the Treasury couldn't wait, till September and the start of the new school year, which would have given parents and schools more time to plan. So I would have done that. I am, though, in favour of the policy as a whole.
Why is that?
Well, because I think it's about fairness. I mean, Christine's obviously got a very special situation in her school, and some smaller schools will be affected, which is why I think it would have been better to give schools time to plan. But I've just been reading about a school that in a private school that is passing on the full 20% cut, but it's changing every piano in its school from a normal piano to a Steinway, because apparently all Steinway schools is one of the new ways of attracting kids to go to private schools. There's a kind of arms race of facilities. We've had 15 years of a tough settlement for the public sector. We've seen the schools that 93% of British kids go to having to make really hard choices, and I'm afraid that private schools are either going to pass it on and get fewer people coming, or they're going to have to take those hard choices, because you're absolutely right, it's about people paying out taxed income. But if you're one of the 93% of kids who go to state school, and at Christmas you wanted to buy your kid a new laptop to help them with their homework, you were paying for that out of taxed income. You're paying for all the things that they need for their education out of taxed income. So it's about fairness, although I would have done it in a slightly fairer way by bringing it in September.
OK, Charlotte Griffiths.
I just think it's so unfair on the smaller independent schools. There's one I've been looking at for my daughters in a rural community, and it only had about 8 or 10 pupils anyway, and a couple of those from each year group were coming out. So now you've got 6 or 7 pupils in a year group. They can't pull together a sports team, and also it's the heart of the community. And for those parents that don't have another choice because the next state school around in the area isn't very good, this is also quite troubling. And what I worry about is that these 6,000 teachers that we've been promised will never manifest, and that, the general improvement won't come fast enough in 2025 to make up for this.
Well, final word to Christine Cunliffe. Of course, lots of independent schools have bursary programmes, will be facilitating programmes in state schools nearby. Do you think we're going to see those sort of charitable aspects of the independent sector be reduced?
No, I don't think we will. I think that's what we're here to do. And we're talking about 100% of children in our country. There's got to be a better way to do it than taxing people that were promised they would not be taxed at the election time. And that's our middle-class parents, predominantly, who are now being taxed. It's not schools. This is not a tax break for schools.
Well, Christine Cunliffe, thank you so much for joining us here in the studio, head teacher at LVS Ascot, and, of course, to my panel too. Plenty more to come, indeed, on Good Afternoon Britain. We're going to be looking across the country for those New Year's celebrations and, indeed, checking up on, quite frankly, how awful the weather is in some parts of the UK. That after this.
Good afternoon, it's 1:33. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. Now more on that breaking news coming to us from the US, where a vehicle has ploughed into crowds of people celebrating the New Year in New Orleans in what the local mayor called a terrorist attack. 10 people are known to have been killed and at least 35 people have been injured in the incident, which took place on the corner of the popular Bourbon Street in the French Quarter of the city, a tourist destination. Local police have been giving an update and saying the pickup truck was driven at a very fast pace and very intentional behaviour and not a drink driving incident. The driver of the vehicle got out and opened fire on police, with 2 officers shot and in a stable condition. Improvised explosive devices were also found in the vehicle. It happened at around 3 a.m. local time, and people are being asked to stay away from the scene. Sir Keir Starmer has hailed 2024 as a year of change as he shared his first New Year message as Prime Minister. Sir Keir declared that the UK will embark on a year of rebuilding and rediscovering the great nation we are in 2025.
Until you can look forward and believe in the promise and the prosperity of Britain again, then this government will fight for you.
But the Conservatives have accused Labour of offering change for the worse, as Kemi Badenoch used her own New Year message to warn that efforts to turn around Tory fortunes would be bumpy.
Happy New Year. Like all of you, I am looking forward to a 2025 that is full of hope, security and prosperity. The Conservative Party is also going through a period of change. This process of renewal will be a long-term project. Things may be bumpy along the way, but the party I now lead is going to do things differently. Watch this space.
Meanwhile, following a stormy New Year's Eve, the wild weather looks set to continue, with London's New Year's Day parade delayed due to high winds forecast. It has now got underway in central London, with thousands of revellers braving the weather. Forecasters were predicting 50-mile-per-hour gusts in London on New Year's Day as wind and rain sparked travel disruption in the UK. And domestic energy prices have risen by more than expected, with more pain for bill payers set to come. The second increase in the Ofgem's price cap this winter takes effect today and means someone paying by direct debit and using a typical amount of gas and electricity will pay £1,738 a year. That is a £21 increase on last year under the previous cap. So bill payers are being urged to submit a meter reading to avoid overpaying on estimated usage. Bills are about 50% higher than pre-COVID levels, and analysts predict they will rise by a further 3% in April. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, Happy New Year, and here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We'll see wind and rain clearing away to the southeast today, giving way to much cold weather with some wintry hazards developing across the north of the UK. This area of low pressure moving away to the south and east, taking its wind and rain with it as we go through the day today, leaving a northerly airstream in its wake, and it's this that will introduce much colder weather for the UK over the next few days. So looking at things in more detail then for the rest of this afternoon, a wind warning in force across the south and southeast of the UK until 3 o'clock with some outbreaks of rain, quite heavy in places, moving away to the south and southeast. Some wintry conditions across the central slice of the UK, snow especially on the hills here, and to the north a mixture of some sleet, snow and some hail showers feeding in on a northerly breeze. Mild air in the south, but turning colder from the north, and certainly to end the day we'll see lots of wintry showers feeding in across the north of Scotland, a mixture of clear spells, some sleet, some hail, some snow in places, and temperatures already dipping below freezing in a few places. A few showers to contend with across the north of Northern Ireland as well, but elsewhere across the north of the UK it's mostly fine. A lot of clear weather around, but temperatures will be dipping below freezing, so turning frosty and icy in places. The wintry showers across the central slice of the UK there tended to ease, and the last of the wind and rain across the south and southeast, also moving away towards the southeast later in the day. As we go into the evening then and through the overnight period, the last of that rain will clear from the southeast. The showers across the central slice will tend to ease. So overnight, wintry showers become mainly confined to those areas exposed to the northerly flow. Lots of ice around tonight, lots of frost, temperatures widely dipping below freezing. And as I say, plenty of showers, especially across the north of the UK. Towns and city temperatures below freezing, down to around -7 or -8 degrees across some snow-covered areas towards the north of the UK. As for Thursday, well, lots of sunshine after that very cold start, but it will stay chilly through the day. A cold north to northwesterly wind blowing in most areas. Temperatures will struggle to around 6 or 7 degrees at best, and some showers continuing to feed in from the north to northwest, especially to areas exposed to that flow. Stay warm, and I'll see you later. Take care for now. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us.
We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 39 minutes past 1. And of course, as the new year rolls around, Happy New Year, by the way, so does the opportunity to save some money. And by goodness, I know lots of us need that right now. Now, according to researchers, the average household will go on 3 holidays this year. 3, which will come as a bit of a cost. But there's a few simple things you can do to knock up to £600 off that holiday bill. So what are these secret top tips? To tell us more, we're delighted to be joined by the head of travel at The Sun, Lisa Minow. Lisa, thanks for joining us here and Happy New Year. How on earth do we save money travelling?
Well, it's really simple. It's about not just focusing on what you're spending on your holiday, but all the money that you spend before your holiday in terms of getting to the airport. So that's airport parking. Now, incredibly, 7% of us in the UK last year just rocked up at the airport and paid the price for airport parking on the day. Now, you can save up to £196 purely by just literally booking your holiday parking in advance. This is from a new survey from Holiday Extras, and they've also found that we've spent £36 per person on average once we're in the airport on food and drink, airport Wi-Fi, even the odd sort of cheeky duty-free purchase as well. But all of those things add up. And actually an airport lounge, which would really start your holiday off nicely, if they've booked in advance, far enough in advance, they start from just £15.
I have to say, I am so guilty of this. I know intellectually I should go to the shop before I get to the airport to get my Werther's Originals and my wine gums, but invariably I get to the airport and there are these packets that are normally, you know, £1.50, and in the airport they're £5. I mean, it's outrageous.
It is, and that's why I think sometimes actually just arriving and going into a lounge can save you money, because you've got your maybe drinks and snacks will be free or they'll be discounted, you know, in a quieter area, and more importantly, you're away from temptation. You're not going to be near all of those shops and wanting to spend money. But you know, it's ever more important that we realise that the earlier we book all of these extras, the more you're going to have to spend on your actual holiday itself. Even something as simple as dropping your car off, you know, being dropped off at the airport is now increasingly going to be much more expensive. You know, we've seen up to 200% increases in airport drop-off fees. So it's always a really good idea to not just focus on the holiday and what you're going to be doing on the holiday, but what you're going to be doing beforehand, how you're going to get there, where you're going to be dropped off. Is it a really early morning flight? Perhaps you want to actually have an airport hotel, because many times actually the airport hotel and parking come out about the same price as just booking your parking.
That's fascinating. But let's turn to the flights themselves, because I've heard so many different schools of thought in terms of whether it's best to book last minute, best to book a year in advance. I mean, what is the skill to getting the best deal for those air flights?
I think in general, most flights are going to be cheaper when they're booked about 3 to 6 months advance. But obviously it changes throughout the world. And so it's a really good idea to have some kind of tracker set up. You can do these on the internet, which will tell you when you're going to get the cheapest fares for a particular time of year. So it does really change because, of course, you've got different temperatures, different reasons for people to be going to different destinations. So there is no one thing sets all. But generally, if you're looking to be flying out, Sunday or midweek is going to be the cheapest days, and obviously those really unsocial early morning flights are always going to be cheaper than the ones that are at a nice sort of lunchtime departure.
Well, that's really, really good information there for those of us that are looking at the weather forecast today and the next couple of days and thinking, my goodness me, I think I need a bit of sunshine. But Lisa Minow, thanks so much for joining us, Head of Travel at The Sun. Appreciate your time. Thank you. Well, with me in the studio are my panel, Matthew Larzer and Charlotte Griffiths. Charlotte, I suppose it could be said the best way to save money is to not go on holiday at all.
Yeah, I think there's an old adage that you shouldn't get on a plane if it's warm outside in the UK. So don't use a plane in the summer months. Do go on holiday, actually, but you just go to Pembrokeshire or Perthshire or maybe even Ireland, although it will definitely rain there. And you just manage your expectations and then use the flights, the flight money, in the winter months when you really have to get out of this place.
Ah, I see. Summer holidays in Britain.
Yes.
Winter holidays further afield.
Don't spend money on flights in the summer.
Interesting. What's your philosophy?
Oh, that's a good strategy. Yeah, well, I mean, I'm lucky I haven't got kids, so I can avoid those incredibly expensive 6 to 8 weeks of the summer holidays, which absolutely hit families so hard, and that's obviously where we see the consequence of people taking their kids out of school at other parts of the year. Bridget Phillipson, who we've been talking about the education sector, says she's going to clamp down on that, so that's going to push the prices up for, even further as demand increases in the core summer holiday market. So, yeah, mine is to try and go when the schools aren't on holiday, which is pretty obvious, but also I'm a bit of one of those who games it, especially if you're going with a low-cost airline. You often find that the flight actually does go down. If you hesitate, and you leave it fairly last minute, you can pick up some bargains.
Well, there we go. And I've got to ask, do you have any holidays planned in the next few months, getting some winter sun at all?
I'm going to St Lucia.
Oh, St Lucia!
In 2 weeks.
Oh!
I know. I'm being really
fantastic.
fancy. I'm going without the kids as well.
Wow.
I'm a family of 5.
That is a holiday.
Yeah, I'm a family of 5, so if I was to take everyone to St Lucia, I would break the bank, it really would. But I just thought, it's got to be done. I'm hardly ever go on holiday with my husband anymore.
So it's a day holiday?
Because of the flights. It's a day, it's like a long flight. Because, yeah, we always travel with the kids. It's far too expensive, so we're just treating ourselves.
Oh, very, very nice.
Well, I just came back from Malta just before Christmas, so I had a little burst of summer sun. Very pleasant, about sort of, 18, so, yeah.
Malta's all the rage at the moment, by the way.
Absolutely. I'm there a lot. I would encourage everybody to go.
My favourite Maltese fact. In the 1960s, they held a referendum.
They did.
To join the United Kingdom, as if they were, the Isle of Wight.
Or Gibraltar.
Or Gibraltar.
Yeah.
But to be a constituent part of the United Kingdom. And that referendum passed with a supermajority. They all wanted to join. Only for the British government to say, no, you have to be an independent country. I think there's something about trying to fund the health service would have been too expensive. But what a missed opportunity there. We could have been flying to British sovereign territory to get that.
Well, they also had a referendum about whether to speak Italian or English earlier than that, and they opted for English. So I can tell you they're very pleased that they made the right option there, because they're now becoming a global hub for industries like gaming.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
And Gladiator, have you seen the Gladiator film?
I haven't yet.
Filmed in Malta. Filmed in Malta, absolutely.
The Queen famously lived there. So
She
they're very
did.
fond of us.
Well, fantastic. We're a fountain of facts.
We are.
Well, Charlotte Griffiths, Matthew Larser, thanks so much for talking us through those travel tips. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Plenty more to come. Indeed, did you know that girls in the United Kingdom are the most boozy amongst us? What's this all about? This next.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Osama bin Laden issued a fatwa entitled World Front for Combat Against Jews and Crusaders, and President George W. Bush talked of a crusade on terrorism. In 2010, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula sent a parcel bomb to New York. It was addressed to Reginald of Chatillon. The addressee had died at the hands of Saladin in 1187. Those facts suggest that the long history of struggle between Christendom and Islamic caliphates remains relevant, at least to some militant Islamists. That being the case, perhaps we should all understand the past. General Sir Simon Mayle, a former Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff Operations, can be our teacher, particularly if we want to know in gory detail about battles to control Jerusalem, Constantinople, Vienna and the Eastern Mediterranean. His new book is called The House of War. It's an excellent read, which perhaps ought to figure in a national adult curriculum. And he joins me. But let's begin with the word crusade. What was it that drove Christians around Europe to want to cross to the Holy Land and seize Jerusalem?
Context and timing is really important to understand. It's been rather stereotyped as Christian aggression against peace-loving Muslims. The Islamic religion had burst out of the desert in the 7th century with the death of the Prophet Muhammad. And for the next nearly 400 years, had Christianity, Christendom, the Christian states absolutely on the back foot. It took the Holy Land, destroyed the Persian Empire, took the North Africa, which was Christian at the time, including Egypt, of course, took Spain all the way into Tours, Charles Martel. 100 years after the death of the Prophet, it expanded an extraordinary state.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 10 minutes to 2 o'clock. And get this, teenage girls are out drinking their male peers in the UK at a greater rate than any other European country. Yes, more than a third of 15-year-old girls in the UK report getting repeatedly drunk, compared to less than a quarter of boys the same age. I suppose what I'd say to this is, boys, what are you doing? Pull yourself together. Well, joining me now is the editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, and the former Labour advisor, Matthew Larser. Charlotte, you're going to have to speak up on behalf of girls the country over here. 15-year-old girls boozing much more than their male counterparts.
I think it's to do with the pain threshold, so we can handle hangovers better.
Do you get hangovers when you're 15 years old?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I was drinking hooch and smelling...
Absolutely. Whatever happened to hooch?
Yeah. And I just think we can tolerate it better. Right. And I don't know, I grew up in that kind of wild child 90s drinking era. I'm showing my age a bit. And, God, we drank a lot as teenage girls. I mean, it's actually shocking now in retrospect. We can just handle it, though. We can handle ourselves the next day.
But the other angle to this, Matthew, is that in Europe, we're not seeing the same thing that we're seeing in Britain. It's teenage girls in Britain that are particularly boozy, far more so than European counterparts.
Well, I also think in terms of boys versus girls, I wonder if we've got a bit of a thing about... I mean, the old cliché that girls develop quicker, they can become social quicker. They can certainly get into the pub more easily because they look older. Yeah. You know, because of makeup, etc. I wonder if the boys are all just, you know, in their rooms playing on their devices, as it were. You know, as people increasingly dominated by screens. Whether in fact there's an issue about socialisation, about whether in fact you know the lads are not out there socialising in the same way. So they're not caning it because they're talking to gaming it. Absolutely. There we go. That's brilliant.
Poetry here at GB News this New Year's Day. I know. I have to say, when I was 15 years, I think it wasn't until I was sort of 15 and a half that I actually had my growth spurt. I looked quite young for the first half of my sort of. So I do. There is this developmental thing. Maybe this is all making a mountain out of a molehill, but that doesn't account for the European difference. Yeah. Do they have a healthier attitude to alcohol?
They really do. They really do. They kind of grow up having red wine at the table and stuff, don't they? So it's said. I actually can't really believe that, to be honest, but that is the cliché. But in theory, they have little sips of wine in France from the age of, like, 12, and they're absolutely fine about it. Yeah. Whereas we all know what happens to British girls, because I was one of them. You turn, however, old enough to get a bottle of Smirnoff Ice, and boy, do you go for it, and until you're vomiting, basically, the tube station.
When you go to... I mean, I suppose there's also a bit of a climate thing. If you go to Southern Europe, you do see people... So you see sort of, you know, 15, 16, even 17-year-olds sitting around drinking kind of, you know, sort of 2 cans of Fanta in the square and just kind of making it last because obviously you can stay outside, you can just kind of chill. Whereas in Britain, if you know, it's about going to the pub and getting into the pub.
Binging. They don't have binge culture in Europe.
But I think there's something also about our climate. If you're going to go out and you don't want to pay to put a coat in a cloakroom,
There speaks a man from experience.
You're going to want to put your beer jacket on. I used to do this at
Definitely.
university. We would drink to stay warm, and then walk out in our t-shirts to go to.
There's also, of course, a big thing about a cost of living crisis affects young people as well. Pre-drinks is the big thing now, where people go and absolutely load up before they go out for the
Or as
night.
the Americans call it, pre-gaming. Which I think
Can the Americans just drink a bottle of beer before they... I mean, it just doesn't count to me. I've always thought that about Americans. They're not very good at binge drinking.
They're not good, and they
it's
overdo
vodka
it
before you go out.
Well, it's because they're being 21.
Drink until they're 21. They get off to university. They've never had a drop of alcohol before in their lives, and then suddenly they overindulge with funnels down their gullets and all the rest of it. Well, much more to come here on Good Afternoon Britain. Thanks so much to my panel. Stay with us. We're going to have the latest from New Orleans after this.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Over the next few days, things will turn much colder across the UK. There'll be plenty of sunshine around, but some snow and ice in places as well. Low pressure's moving away to the south and east of the UK now, taking wind and rain with it, allowing a northerly airstream to become established across the UK, and this will introduce some wintry hazards as we go through the coming few days. Wet and windy weather then clearing away to the southeast as we go through the evening. Some wintry showers across the central slice of the UK, also easing as we go through the overnight period. So showers becoming mainly confined to areas exposed to the north to northwesterly airstream. And again, those showers will be wintry in places, especially across the hills towards the north, but to some lower levels in places as well. A widespread frost forming, temperatures in towns and cities below freezing, down to -7 or -8 in a few parts of Scotland, and there'll be some ice around to start the day on Thursday as well. So starting Thursday then, further wintry showers moving in from the north into the northern parts of Scotland, a mixture of hail, sleet and some snow in places. Southern parts of Scotland mostly fine to start the day, some clear weather but very chilly here, some frost and some ice in places. A few wintry showers into Northern Ireland, southern parts of Northern Ireland seeing the best of the quieter weather to start the day here. A few showers also across the Irish Sea areas, down across North Sea coastal areas of eastern England, but elsewhere lots of sunshine around, and that's the way of things we go through Thursday. There will be plenty of sunshine, certainly across inland areas, but it will be a cold day wherever you are with a north to northwesterly wind blowing, and further showers feeding down in that north to northwesterly airstream, particularly into northern Scotland, down across parts of Northern Ireland, the west of England, and down some North Sea coasts at times too. Temperatures are at the very best up to 6 or 7 degrees, but add on the effect of that north to northwesterly wind and feeling close to, if not below freezing in one or two places. As we go into the evening, the showers will tend to become more and more confined to those coasts, so a frost and some ice forming again as we go into the overnight period. Again, a very cold night developing, and we hold on to a mixture of sunshine and wintry showers on Friday, with a risk of some more persistent rain and some snow moving in from the southwest as we go into the weekend. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000 in tax-free cash.
My name is Cliff.
And my name is Julie, and we won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, our next guests have been working closely with celebrities and MPs to help clean up
our planet.
Very important. Think Ocean was founded in 2021 with two main goals. One, educating the next generation to make sure that they know when they're growing up that naturally we have to take care of the planet and cleaning pollution that's already in the environment.
Well, joining us now to tell us more is Think Ocean's founder, Hugo Valdez-Vera, and the co-founder, Nolene Mariappan. Really good to see you both this morning. So, Nolene, let's start with you. What is Think Ocean and why did you want to start this back in 2021?
Yes, so Hugo had actually been working on the environment and climate action for quite a long time. When he moved to the UK, he realised that there was a growing problem with plastic pollution and that more needed to be done because people weren't actually seeing the link between plastic, the impact on the environment and climate change. So he founded the organisation and I joined him with three goals, really. Education, looking at technology to scale solutions, and looking at how we develop more circular economy programs. So actually looking at reusing, recycling, actually creating local economies from what people would consider waste.
Hugo, just how bad is plastic pollution around the world, and especially here in the UK?
Well, it is bad, but we don't know the extent of how bad it is. You know, this is not much interest from the bigger players or, you know, some government for us to know every detail of the pollution. So if we know that is from 1 to 10 is 2, probably it's about 6.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 1st of January. Happy New Year. My name's Tom Harwood. Now, at least 10 people have been killed and 35 injured after a vehicle struck a crowd celebrating New Year in New Orleans. The mayor of the city claims that the incident was a terror attack, as reports suggest the suspect was shot dead by the police. We'll bring you the very latest as this story develops. Back in Blighty, Britain rings in the new year in style with a sparkling fireworks display in London, despite a wave of cancellations and weather warnings across the rest of the country. And Sir Keir Starmer hails a year of change as he delivers his first New Year message as Prime Minister, with a plan for more cash in your pocket in 2025.
Until you can look forward and believe in the promise and the prosperity of Britain again, then this government will fight for you.
Energy bills rise for millions today as you are being encouraged to send meter readings to your energy supplier. Now, it's an incredibly busy show today. We've got so much to cover. Energy bills going up, but also this incident in New Orleans. This is leading the programme today. We didn't expect it to be quite such a sad and tragic lead to the show. We were hoping to have some more jollity on this New Year's Day, but of course, 10 people dead. Many more in hospital, in over 5 different hospitals in the region. We're learning more and more about this incident throughout the afternoon, so do stay with us. The very latest line that is being reported by American media is that the suspect has been declared dead. That is reported across many different American media outlets. We know that there was a shootout between the suspect and the police. 2 police officers shot, and we are learning more and more about all of this. We were hearing, of course, from 3 different officials, from the mayor of New Orleans, LaToya Cantrell. She said this was a terrorist incident. But then we heard from Special Agent Duncan of the FBI, who said that it wasn't. We're getting to the bottom of that and many more issues besides. We're going to be finding out much more about what's going on in New Orleans throughout the programme. Do get involved. gbnews.com/your say is the way to do that. But before all of that, we're going to be with your very latest news headlines.
Tom, thank you. Good afternoon. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. More on that breaking news coming to us from the US. As you've just been hearing, 10 people have been killed after a vehicle ploughed into crowds of people celebrating the New Year in New Orleans in what the local mayor called a terrorist attack. At least 35 people have been injured in the incident, which took place on the corner of the popular Bourbon Street in the French Quarter of the city, a tourist destination. Local police have been giving an update and saying the pickup truck was driven at a very fast pace and very intentional behaviour and not a drink driving incident. They said the driver of the vehicle got out and opened fire on police, with 2 officers shot and in a stable condition. It happened at around 3 a.m. local time, and people are being asked to stay away from the scene. US media is now reporting the suspect is also believed to be dead, but we will bring you more on that as we get it. In other news, Sir Keir Starmer has hailed 2024 as a year of change as he shared his first New Year's message as Prime Minister. Sir Keir declared that the UK will embark on a year of rebuilding and rediscovering the great nation we are in 2025.
Until you can look forward and believe in the promise and the prosperity of Britain again, then this government will fight for you.
But the Conservatives have accused Labour of offering change for the worse, as Kemi Badenoch used her own New Year's message to warn that efforts to turn around Tory fortunes would be bumpy.
Happy New Year. Like all of you, I am looking forward to a 2025 that is full of hope, security and prosperity. The Conservative Party is also going through a period of change. This process of renewal will be a long-term project. Things may be bumpy along the way, but the party I now lead is going to do things differently. Watch this space.
Meanwhile, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage addressed the nation from Blenheim Palace.
You know, the fish rots from the head down. We have been appallingly led in this country now for several decades. We are in societal decline. We are in economic decline. Most people are getting poorer with every year that passes. We're losing any sense of national identity. And we're actually teaching kids at school that people like Winston Churchill, born in this palace, are bad people and that our country's history is something to be ashamed of.
And Sir Ed Davey, the leader of the Lib Dems, also looked back on 2024.
Devastating effects of climate change, from floods to wildfires. So much instability and insecurity, all made worse by Donald Trump's victory in November. But despite all that, I think we can all look forward to 2025 with genuine hope. Hope because I know that UK can rise to these challenges, home and abroad. We have the people, the grit, the talent, the businesses, and the right values to change things for the better.
Meanwhile, following a stormy New Year's Eve, the wild weather looks set to continue, with London's New Year's Day parade being delayed due to high winds forecast. It has now got underway in central London, with thousands of revellers braving the weather. Forecasters are predicting 50-mile-per-hour gusts in London on New Year's Day, as wind and rain spark travel disruption across the UK. And domestic energy prices have risen, with more pain for bill payers set to come. The second increase in Ofgem's price cap this winter takes effect today and means someone paying by direct debit and using a typical amount of gas and electricity will pay £1,738 a year. That's a £21 a year more increase than under the previous cap. So bill payers are being urged to submit a meter reading to avoid overpaying on estimated usage. Bills are about 50% higher than pre-COVID levels, and analysts predict they will rise again further by 3% in April. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Tom.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 7 minutes past 2. And straight to the United States now, where multiple people are feared dead after a massive vehicle charged through a crowd of partygoers in New Orleans. Well, emergency officials have said at least 10 people have been killed after a vehicle struck a crowd celebrating the new year. The incident happened at around 3:15 a.m. on local time, New Year's Day. The number of injured survivors is suspected to be upwards of 30. They're across multiple different hospitals in the region. The mayor of New Orleans said that the incident was a terror-related attack, as reports from American news outlets now suggest that the suspect in question, a man, is dead. Well, the mayor of New Orleans, LaToya Cantrell, had this to say.
The city of New Orleans was impacted by a terrorist attack. It's all still under investigation. You'll hear more after me. However, I have been in direct contact with the White House, with Governor Landry, and of course a unified command who is present here. What I'm asking at this time are prayers for those who have lost their lives in the city of New Orleans due to this tragedy. In addition to that, I'm asking the public to stay clear of 8 blocks around Bourbon Street. Stay clear from Bourbon Street, 8 blocks around. Very active, and again, a unified command.
Well, Police Superintendent Anne Kirkpatrick told reporters how many casualties they're dealing with.
It is a very tragic situation for me to tell you that we know we have 10 people that this man killed. We have information to a certain degree of the demographics of those who are in the hospital right now. We do not know at this point how many could be tourists versus locals, but from the information I have right now, it seems the majority are locals versus tourists. And because of the intentional mindset of this perpetrator who went around our barricades in order to conduct this, he was hell-bent on creating the carnage and the damage that he did.
Well, it's a developing situation, and we're going to bring you the new information that we find all the time. Of course, the latest line that we hear from American media is that the suspect is dead. Let's discuss this now with the former head of counter-terrorism, Chris Phillips. Chris, thanks so much for being with us this New Year's Day. Not the kind of story any of us wanted to be discussing. This is, of course, a developing situation. But firstly, your response to the news that we're just hearing now, that the suspect is dead.
Well, for me, that's good news. It may not be for everyone's liking, but I'm afraid the best terrorist is a dead terrorist in my mind. Yeah, it's an interesting addition to the recent attacks we've had on events such as this. The German markets, etc., have been attacked recently. But once again, it's an iconic site that's been attacked. And there was some quite worrying comments, actually, from the police and the mayor, the FBI person in particular. They haven't realised yet whether or not this is a terrorist attack. And the fact that the vehicle was able to get around barricades is probably the biggest sin of all, because if you're going to put barricades up, then you put them up to stop vehicles, not to allow them to go around.
Certainly. Well, we heard from LaToya Cantrell, the mayor of New Orleans, saying we are dealing with a terrorist attack. And then just minutes later, Special Agent Duncan of the FBI said that this is not a terrorist incident. What do you think accounts for that discrepancy, that lack of communication?
Really poor, isn't it? And it sums up the US system of policing, actually. They're not joined up at all. The simple fact is you don't really know whether it's a terrorist attack. It may bear all the hallmarks of a terrorist attack, but we don't know what's in his mind, the rationale, the reason for doing it, because the reason for doing it is the motive is what makes it a terrorist attack. But to all intents and purposes, it looks very much like that. And I think you just say that you're not sure at the moment, but investigation will tell you, not say opposites, from the person that's spoken before.
No, and it is incredibly serious. It will be incredibly concerning for people that are not just in New Orleans, not just in Louisiana, but frankly, the world over. We all at this time of year enjoy going to events, crowded events, where it seems like events like this are becoming more and more common throughout the Western world.
Well, they're fairly simple targets, particularly if you don't protect against vehicle attacks like this. But of course, in the US, if he had a gun and he had bombs anyway, I mean, people were going to die, unfortunately, once he made the decision to attack. But of course, you can make it more difficult. I mean, I was in Bourbon Street just a few months ago, and it's a fascinating place. It's, Canal Street is a massive highway with 2 or 3 lanes of traffic in each direction, but then you go into the grid, which is Bourbon Street and the French Quarter, and actually it's more like our roads. It's more smaller and not really made up for vehicles very well, and it's quite easy to shut those areas down. And if you're going to have a parade or you're going to have an event such as this, it's a good idea to put vehicle defences in to keep the pedestrians safe.
Well, Chris, we're looking at live pictures now of the scene where there is an 8-block exclusion zone around that area. Of course, suspected improvised explosive devices were found in the pickup truck that ploughed into this crowd. I suppose there will be some fears that there might be more improvised explosive devices in the area.
Yeah, and let's be quite honest, we don't know whether this person, if it is a terrorist, acted alone. And of course, if he has got bombs in the car, they should be 400 metres away at least. But not only that, they need to worry about where he made the bomb up, because there's very likely to be more explosive material at that location. So there's an awful lot of work to do. The fact that this guy is dead is one thing. But of course, we don't know, they don't know yet, I don't imagine, who he is properly and who he's been communicating and working with, and whether he's working on his own or with a group of people.
Well, Chris Phillips, former head of Counter-terrorism, really appreciate your expertise and your thoughts this afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us here on Good Afternoon Britain. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to now expand this to my panel. Delighted to be joined in the studio by the chairman of Republicans Overseas, Greg Swenson. First of all, Greg, tell us a bit about the area. What is New Orleans like?
Well, New Orleans is a real destination for tourists. It's one of the top 5 destination cities in America for tourism. So the population really swells especially during big moments like this, like New Year's weekend or Mardi Gras in the spring. And so it's only 350 or so thousand people, but it really grows during these big tourist events and really all the time on weekends. It's very much a party town. So the clips that we're showing are unusual to see. I mean, maybe the last time you'd see Bourbon Street or the French Quarter looking like that was during the COVID lockdowns or after Katrina. So it's a city that's had its ups and downs. It's always battled a very high crime rate. It's battled poverty. And then, of course, you had Katrina. It did have a rebound after Katrina, so from the census of 2010 to 20, they actually gained population. But like most Democrat-run cities or blue states in the last 3 years, they've lost population again, which they could ill afford. So it's not a perfectly run city, to say the least. That's not suggesting that this is anybody's fault, but they have had their ups and downs.
Yeah. Now, of course, people will be looking to political response from this. We've got an incumbent president who is still president for the next 20 days, Joe Biden, and, of course, the man that many people are calling the president already, really. I suppose Donald Trump inaugurated, of course, 20th of January. We're going to be expecting statements from both of these men.
Yeah, I suppose there will be. Ultimately, there's always some political aspect to it. But, I'm curious to see how this fits the narrative of the Democrats that run these big cities that are all suffering. And I mentioned the population decline. Every one of them, all the big blue cities, all the blue states have suffered real population decline. And there's also a surge of crime in these big cities. So this is a difficult time for them. It'll be interesting to see what the narrative is.
One thing that we haven't mentioned, of course, is that this is a predominantly African-American area, and there could be motives behind this attack, that it could be racially motivated?
Yeah, we don't know yet. I mean, the city's over 50% African-American, but as I mentioned, the tourism is a big part of it. So I'm guessing at 3 a.m. on New Year's Eve, it was a very mixed crowd, to say the least. We don't know anything in terms of the identity of the perpetrators. So, we'll see. And it does kind of remind many of us of the Boston Marathon bombing, which is, at least 10 years ago, where 3 people died tragically. But it's this big crowd around sporting events that makes us nervous. The game tonight is the Sugar Bowl. It's part of the college football playoff. It's 2 very highly ranked teams with fans that travel. You have Georgia and Notre Dame. So there'll be 75,000 people at the stadium tonight, which I think is going to be difficult for police.
That will be a huge security operation, no doubt. We're going to expand this now to my panel, Matthew Larzer and Charlotte Griffiths. Matthew, this is a horrific thing to be talking about on New Year's Day, but sadly, these sort of events are becoming more common.
Absolutely, but I think they have more impact even when they happen on something like New Year's Day, particularly if we think about America as a divided country. Excuse me, President Trump, maybe not the biggest conciliator in the world, but nonetheless, I think everybody would want to see a country that was less at war with itself. Well, if it turns out that this is a kind of symptom of a country at war with itself, if there was a kind of political, in any sense, motive behind it, then that's really not a good start. Obviously, beyond the tragic loss of life, that's not a good start for the country's psyche as it enters what is clearly, for some people, will be very pleased Trump is there. A lot of people are very pleased, very upset he's there. And this is sort of going to add to that sense of disquiet that, you sort of seen around the national story.
Yeah. Charlotte, we've seen cars plough into groups of people, sadly, all too commonly. We've seen it attempted in London. We've seen it happen in London. We've seen it in Germany. But this has more levels on top of that. This is a gun as well, and potentially improvised explosive devices on top of that.
It's very rare you see all 3 of these things in play at the same time. Thank goodness those devices didn't go off. It makes me think it's a really sophisticated, pre-planned attack. I mean, he must have been thinking about this for a very, very long time. And it's just so tragic. I think my personal belief is I think we get more of these events because of social media. And perhaps people alone in their bedrooms, on TikTok for hours in a day, plotting these things. It really worries me. I think in the future, I think we should try and tackle this kind of stuff.
No, lots to think about. Lots, no doubt, that will be discussed in the coming days. We're expecting a press conference, a formal press conference with questions this time at 11 a.m. local time. That's 5 p.m. GMT. We'll, of course, bring you that live on GB News, but more information coming in about this all the time. We're going to bring you all the new lines that we get as soon as we get them. But this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and there's plenty more to come on today's programme. Indeed, we're going to be looking at some of the pretty ropey weather around the United Kingdom. Don't go anywhere.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
It's about Generation Z spending 6 hours a day online. Generation Z, which age group is that?
16 to 24.
OK, great.
So, now, this could explain why there's 1 million young people aged between 16 and 24.
100%.
Not working.
Work.
Yeah.
And I did a TV show and we're talking about it, and the lefty person I was on with was making excuses for the fact that we've got 9 million people unemployed. And this woman, this mom, rang in, and she was hilarious. And I thought she was going to have a go at me. She said, Carol Malone. I thought, here we go, another one. And she goes, you are absolutely right. She said, I've just thrown my son out of the house, who's 24. She said, my husband and I, she said, we worked all our lives, 2 jobs, to get him to college, to get him to a private school. Yeah. She said, he hasn't worked a day.
No.
And his attitude was, why should I? And you think... And she said he spends all day online.
On his phone.
All he's
Because
doing.
we would have gone to get a job because we were bored. And the trouble is, Jonathan, the younger generation are never, ever bored because the algorithms keep them stimulate.
Well, the dopamine hits keep coming. I think it's actually a problem for all of us. Yeah. You know, now for anyone, if you just have a moment to yourself, a lot of people of all ages, what do we reach for? We reach for our phones, particularly for those. Obviously, if we're with a friend, we'll talk to them.
Your age group, you're not talking about.
Well, I know that I've spoken to a lot of people who are in their 50s and 60s who also will just, you know, if they have a free on the tube or whatever, they'll just look at their phone and read. And it's actually terrifying because on the iPhone every Monday it tells you how much time you spent on your phone the previous week. And it's,
how much for you, on average, per day?
Fair few hours. I mean, a lot of that would be work.
What's a ballpark? Oh, more than 5?
Occasionally 5. Yeah.
Well,
better things to do.
Spending 6 hours a day.
Do you never read a book? Well, that would be at night time.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 24 minutes past 2. And in the Prime Minister's New Year's message from Downing Street, Sir Keir Starmer has declared the UK will embark on a year of rebuilding, rediscovering the great nation we are in 2025.
2024 was a year of change. Not sadly in the football, another agonisingly close shave for England, but change in politics, with the election of this Labour government in July. And more importantly, with the work of change that we've begun. The minimum wage raised by a record amount, wages up more broadly, returns of foreign national criminals up 20%, billions of pounds worth of new projects in clean British energy, making our country more secure, and £25 billion invested in our NHS, starting to cut waiting lists in your local hospital. Now, I know there's still so much more to do, and that for many people it's hard to think about the future when you spend all of your time fighting to get through the week. So I want to be clear, until you can look forward and believe in the promise and the prosperity of Britain again, then this government will fight for you.
Well, that was the Prime Minister. Hope you managed to stay awake for that. The Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, she released a message as well.
Happy New Year. Like all of you, I am looking forward to a 2025 that is full of hope, security and prosperity. The Conservative Party is also going through a period of change. This process of renewal will be a long-term project. Things may be bumpy along the way, but the party I now lead is going to do things differently. Watch this space.
Well, that was the leader of the opposition, but a man who styles himself as perhaps a more forthright leader of an opposition. I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn there. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage addressed the nation from Blenheim Palace.
You know, the fish rots from the head down. We have been appallingly led in this country now for several decades. We are in societal decline. We are in economic decline. Most people are getting poorer with every year that passes. We're losing any sense of national identity. And we're actually teaching kids at school that people like Winston Churchill, born in this palace, are bad people and that our country's history is something to be ashamed of.
Well, that was Nigel Farage. For his part, Sir Ed Davey, the leader of the Lib Dems, wasn't on a waterslide this time. No, he was looking back on 2024 from a park.
Devastating effects of climate change, from floods to wildfires. So much instability and insecurity, all made worse by Donald Trump's victory in November. But despite all that, I think we can all look forward to 2025 with genuine hope. Hope because I know that UK can rise to these challenges at home and abroad. We have the people, the grit, the talent, the businesses, and the right values to change things for the better.
Personally, I think that would have been more fun if he said that all while on a roller coaster, but we can't have everything in life, can we? Media commentator and former editor of the Sunday Mirror, Paul Connew, joins us now. Paul, good to see you. Happy New Year. Who do you think won the sort of battle of the party leaders when it came to the New Year's messages?
I think, although I'm not a supporter of reform, I think Nigel Farage did, followed by Ed Davey, if only because they introduced some dynamic into it. I thought the Prime Minister was a bit formulaic, and Kenny Badenoch was so brief and short, it was hardly worth recording it.
I suppose there is an argument, if you're the leader of the opposition, if you're Kemi Badenoch, you might realise that people don't necessarily want to listen to a 10, 15-minute address. Perhaps keeping it short and snappy, it might be media savvy.
Not that short and snappy, Tom. But I think this is going to be a year of change, as the Prime Minister said. Perhaps not the change that he would like, or indeed that Kemi Badenoch would like. I mean, in a book I co-authored on the general election, I said that this was going to be the year in which the Tory party's future may be the biggest political story against the backdrop of reform and Nigel Farage's challenge, and whether the Tory party can survive or as an election-winning force again, or without being either replaced by reform or forced into some sort of merger or at least an electoral pact.
Do you think that Nigel Farage looked the most prime ministerial of the four there to some extent, or did it step over that line and almost become regal, speaking from Blenheim Palace?
It was a little over the top, but it was quite a clever move on his part. Blenheim Palace with its Churchillian links, and then, of course, his, I think, overstated claim that Churchill is being denigrated in our schools. I'm a huge admirer of Churchill, but he got certain things wrong in his political, history, and our children should be taught both sides of it. Churchill, the great war leader, and Churchill, the flawed politician.
Yes, I think I remember writing an essay at school about Winston Churchill putting Britain back onto the gold standard at the wrong parity, which was very economically damaging when he was briefly Chancellor of the Exchequer. But I'm not sure that's quite what Nigel Farage was referring to. Paul, we've got to talk about Keir Starmer's slightly scruffy shirt. I mean, it was bunched up at the back. He wasn't wearing a tie. He wasn't wearing a jacket. What's going on?
But as I'm wearing this sort of jumper without a shirt, I'm not going to be too particular.
You're not the Prime Minister, Paul.
Their senatorial presence, but it didn't particularly. I was more interested in what he was saying or trying to say than I was, about his state of his shirt. But I think that he's a Prime Minister under pressure. It's quite interesting. Sir Anthony Selden, the historian and our most respected chronicler of Prime Ministers, who was quite positive about Starmer in the lead up to the general election. He's written a guest column in The Guardian today with the headline, "Rocks Ahead, Starmer Needs to Steer a Clear Course." And Selden is saying something that I'm hearing from some of my own Labour MP contacts, that the Prime Minister is rather torn between being either the chairman of the board or the CEO. And what Selden says, he should be captain of the ship with his eye, on the horizon and a clear idea of the voyage and its destination. And I think this is the flaw at the moment. As Selden said of Starmer, he didn't worry too much at this stage, but he hasn't got too much time to actually give us a narrative, because at the moment there is a narrative lacking. The sort of narrative that the Blair administration had, and whether you like them or not, with Peter Mandelson and Alistair Campbell, who's an old colleague and friend of mine, steering them, there was a clear narrative. But at the moment, this is a government without a clear narrative and a Prime Minister who is struggling to actually convey a narrative. I mean, I'm a Labour supporter, but a far from uncritical one. And Keir Starmer does need a clear vision, as Selden is arguing in The Guardian.
Well, I hope that someone has got Sir Keir perhaps a telescope and a tricorn hat for Christmas. It certainly needs to take charge of that vessel. Paul Clooney, that's all we've got time for, but thanks so much for joining us. Former editor of the Sunday Mirror, of course. Appreciate your time here on Good Afternoon Britain. Now, much more to come, of course. We're going to be looking at many more domestic stories after your news headlines.
Tom, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2:33. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. More on that breaking news coming to us from the US. 10 people have been killed after a vehicle ploughed into crowds of people celebrating the New Year in New Orleans in what the local mayor called a terrorist attack. At least 35 people have been injured in the incident, which took place on the corner of the popular Bourbon Street in the French Quarter of the city, a tourist destination. Local police have been giving an update and saying the pickup truck was driven at a very fast pace and very intentional behaviour and not a drink driving incident. They said the driver of the vehicle got out and opened fire on police, with 2 officers shot and in a stable condition. It happened at around 3 a.m. local time, and people are being asked to stay away from the scene. US media is now reporting the suspect is also believed to be dead, but we will bring you more on that as we get it. In other news now, Sir Keir Starmer has hailed 2024 as a year of change as he shared his first message as Prime Minister. Sir Keir declared that the UK will embark on a year of rebuilding and rediscovering the great nation we are in 2025.
Until you can look forward and believe in the promise and the prosperity of Britain again, then this government will fight for you.
But the Conservatives have accused Labour of offering change for the worse, as Kemi Badenoch used her own New Year's message to warn that efforts to turn around Tory fortunes would be bumpy.
Happy New Year. Like all of you, I am looking forward to a 2025 that is full of hope, security and prosperity. The Conservative Party is also going through a period of change. This process of renewal will be a long-term project. Things may be bumpy along the way, but the party I now lead is going to do things differently. Watch this space.
Meanwhile, following a stormy New Year's Eve, the wild weather looks set to continue, with London's New Year's Day parade delayed due to high winds forecast. It has now got underway in central London, with thousands of revellers braving the weather. Forecasters are predicting 50-mile-an-hour gusts in London on New Year's Day, as wind and rain spark travel disruption in the UK. And to Scarborough now, where brave people are ringing in the New Year's Day by jumping in the freezing cold sea. The 2025 New Year's Day dip has over 150 dippers helping raise thousands of pounds to help those most in need in Scarborough's community. Hundreds turned out on the South Shore to see Scarborough's mayor welcome the dippers before the town crier sent them on their way into the cold North Sea. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, Happy New Year, and here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We'll see wind and rain clearing away to the southeast today, giving way to much cold weather with some wintry hazards developing across the north of the UK. This area of low pressure moving away to the south and east, taking its wind and rain with it as we go through the day today, leaving a northerly airstream in its wake, and it's this that will introduce much colder weather for the UK over the next few days. So looking at things in more detail then for the rest of this afternoon, a wind warning in force across the south and southeast of the UK until 3 o'clock with some outbreaks of rain, quite heavy in places, moving away to the south and southeast. Some wintry conditions across the central slice of the UK, snow especially on the hills here, and to the north a mixture of some sleet, snow and some hail showers feeding in on a northerly breeze. Mild air in the south, but turning colder from the north, and certainly to end the day we'll see lots of wintry showers feeding in across the north of Scotland, a mixture of clear spells, some sleet, some hail, some snow in places, and temperatures already dipping below freezing in a few places. A few showers to contend with across the north of Northern Ireland as well, but elsewhere across the north of the UK it's mostly fine. A lot of clear weather around, but temperatures will be dipping below freezing, so turning frosty and icy in places. The wintry showers across the central slice of the UK there tending to ease, and the last of the wind and rain across the south and southeast, also moving away towards the southeast later in the day. As we go into the evening then and through the overnight period, the last of that rain will clear from the southeast. The showers across the central slice will tend to ease. So overnight, wintry showers become mainly confined to those areas exposed to the northerly flow. Lots of ice around tonight, lots of frost, temperatures widely dipping below freezing. And as I say, plenty of showers, especially across the north of the UK. Towns and city temperatures below freezing, down to around -7 or -8 degrees across some snow-covered areas towards the north of the UK. As for Thursday, well, lots of sunshine after that very cold start, but it will stay chilly through the day. A cold north to northwesterly wind blowing in most areas. Temperatures will struggle to around 6 or 7 degrees at best, and some showers continuing to feed in from the north to northwest, especially to areas exposed to that flow. Stay warm, and I'll see you later. Take care for now. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Happy New Year. It's 39 minutes past 2 and there's plenty more to come on today's programme, not least those energy price rises. But before all of that, Martin Daubney is up at 3, of course. And Martin, what have you got for us?
Well, first of all, Happy New Year to you and Happy New Year to all the viewers out there. Thanks for your continued support, of course. All eyes on 5 o'clock. New Orleans, big press conference expected. Was it a terrorist attack? Wasn't it a terrorist attack? Of course, the mayor said it was. The FBI quickly said, no, it wasn't. So what's going on there? Will we learn anything else about the assailant's identity? Latest reports that he's been eliminated. Will any more reports be released? Of course, there's a big football match tonight in New Orleans. They might want to try and dampen down any speculation that might spook those crowds. Big press conference there. We'll also be looking, as you have been, at the New Year's messages. Kemi Badenoch's 24 seconds. I've done longer burp. I seriously think it was an iPhone message against the wall. It was really unconvincing. Sir Keir Starmer's didn't have a shirt, or he had a shirt on, but no tie, no jacket. It looks like he was dressed down Friday. Got a plan for change. Well, there certainly is change. Is it a change for any good? Nigel Farage's high profile, high production value, looking very statesmanlike. Let's make Britain great again, channeling his inner Donald Trump. Who's going to have a happy new year? Who's going to have a nightmare on Downing Street? And last night, the beacons of hope. 4,000 farmers lit fires across Britain, saying the raging anger of the countryside will not go out, and they're looking ahead. Oh, the government going to change tack or carry on ploughing the same old furrow? Will there be food strikes? Will there be shortages in 2025? So all that 3 till 6.
That sounds like a jam-packed show. Looking forward particularly to that press conference at 5 o'clock, which of course we're going to bring live and unfiltered. Martin Daubney, thanks so much for being with us, and see you at 3.
Cheers.
Well, elsewhere today, domestic energy prices have risen with more pain for bill payers set to come. Yes, it's the second increase in Ofgem's price cap this winter. It takes effect today. And it means someone paying by direct debit and using a typical amount of gas will pay £1,738 a year. Well, let's discuss this now with the former CEO of Energy UK, Angela Knight. Angela, prices going up again.
Yes, that's right. And expected to go up again in about 3 months' time. And you can see why, actually. I mean, firstly, there is an international reason, and that is, the Middle East does not get any calmer. There's still, Russia has still got the war with Ukraine. So there's reasons which are causing interruptions still in demand. Across Europe, it's pretty cold. I'm actually with one of my sons who lives in Spain, as you can see behind me. It's a beautiful day there, but in Central Europe it is not. It's very cold at the moment, so there's demand from there. But the third reason is because we in the UK are making a mess of our energy policy. The talk about, what's happening is going to bring down the price of the bill, the bill that you've got to pay in your home for your gas and electricity is quite frankly wrong. And I do think that it is very remiss for people to have been kidded on that somehow you can have all this investment, you can create a system based on renewables, you can build more backup, which of course is needed, you can shift the grid as is required, and somehow all that money, all those billions, is going to cost us less. That is not the case. We need a sensible, straightforward, practical and doable energy policy in this country, because we don't just need reliable and good energy from a perspective of homes, we need it for our industry as well.
Angela, do you think across the board politicians are being fundamentally dishonest when it comes to energy policy? I mean, it's perfectly possible to say we should go for net zero, we should decarbonise the grid, but every time a politician says that, they say this is going to grow the economy, this is going to create lots of economic opportunity, this is going to lower bills, and yet the more renewables we seem to use, the higher those bills seem to go.
Well, of course they will, because every time you build a unit of renewable, well, you've got to build a unit of backup, because the renewables, the sun doesn't shine all the time, the wind doesn't blow all the time. So you either build that backup or you buy it in, of course. And we are connected to Europe. And when you buy it in, it is expensive. Now, I do actually agree that it makes good sense for us to do the two things of steadily clean up how we produce our heat and our light in this country. And I do think it makes sense that says that when you've got new techniques, new technologies, you will create jobs. So those are two statements which are factually correct. What is wrong is the timetable is ridiculously short and the cost is extremely high. And if you put those together into the mix, as I say, then the true story is that we're on a path to try and change things too quickly, and it's going to cost a huge amount of money. I frankly think that we'll fail in many of those areas. And what is happening right now is that the say one thing but something else happens on your bill means that people increasingly are not only disbelieving what all politicians say, but they're also saying, well, I don't care about net zero any longer. And that is the natural reaction of people and the right reaction when they're being told a story which is fundamentally not true. And that is the problem with this energy story. It's fundamentally not true. It's not wrong to do what we're proposing, but how we're doing it, how we're talking about it, the price of it and the consequences of it, that is not being said. And in all those areas, the consequences are big, the price is big, the timetable is long, it's going to cost a lot of money.
Well, Angela, thanks as always for your clear and cogent analysis there. Former CEO of Energy UK, Angela Knight, thanks so much for being with us on this New Year's Day. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain, and joining me is my panel, the editor-at-large of the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, and the former Labour advisor, Matthew Larser. Matthew, I'm going to turn to you first. It may well be the right thing to decarbonise the grid, but it does cost money.
I think this is a challenge the government faces, which is it sort of particularly made reducing energy bills quite a big issue over the 2 or 3 years before the election. When we were at the height of the Ukraine crisis, there was an actual sort of, we're going to, you know, they were trying to outbid the government in a Dutch auction of who could get your bills down low. If you remember, actually that bill cut was what actually really spooked the markets in the Liz Truss time, because that was when billions and billions were being spent on it. So I think the government has come into power, even if it would say it didn't in the manifesto for the election give a specific promise on exactly how much and when your bill would go down. It was certainly giving the impression your bill was about to go down. As Angela was saying there, perfectly reasonably, actually the investment that's needed may mean that your bill, you know, goes up or doesn't go down in the short term. Labour would argue that it will go down in the long term because you've got more sustainable and ultimately cheaper sources. So it's how you get through that short-term pain. And I think that's going to be a really big challenge for the government, because talk about decarbonising all you like, but when you get that bill through and it's going up, you're not happy.
No, and Charlotte, all parties do this. All energy secretaries do this. They say, isn't this wonderful? It's going to be so cheap. But they refuse to sort of almost acknowledge the fact that it's going to cost money and that money has to come from somewhere.
Yeah, and how long is long term? Because if you think about it, before COVID, I think this is right, bills were 50% cheaper. That wasn't that long ago, you know, it's 5 years ago. So I just think, how long is long term? How long can we bear this short-term pain? Because the years are ticking by. And, you know, £21 extra a year is the new stat, but really it should be going down by 100 quid, 200 quid, until we get back to that number before COVID.
Huge questions. Well, we're going to leave that one there because we need to return to New Orleans. A breaking line for you now on the New Orleans situation. The FBI are now treating the incidents in New Orleans as an act of terrorism. More on that after this.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Bansky's Girl with Balloon is arguably one of the artist's most recognisable images. So when a limited edition print signed by the artist was stolen from Grove Gallery in London, an investigation was launched by the Metropolitan Police's flying squad. The work was thankfully retrieved. The desire to own great works of art has once again become evident this week, albeit a little further afield on the continent. Police in Italy have uncovered a criminal network forging artworks by Bansky, Andy Warhol, Pablo Picasso and others. Investigators said that they've seized more than 2,100 fake pieces of art with a potential market value of about £165 million. With me to discuss that case is the Chief Executive of Grove Gallery, James Ryan.
The art world needs to tighten up. It is known as a bit of a Wild West out there because people will try and chance it with these forgeries. You're quite right, there's only one actual original, but even auction houses have been hoodwinked before.
The burglary that you suffered is sub judice, so we have to be careful what we say about it. But it must have been a bit of a shock to you. I mean, was it a broken window, a smashed door?
At 10, 11 o'clock at night, and just hammer straight through, shoulder barging through the door, and then in and out. You know, gone in 60 seconds. I must say, I know.
Obviously, that targeted attack. The person would have known what he or she was after. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I must say, I know they cop a lot of flack, the police force, but the flying squad got the artwork back within 3 days. They were fantastic. So yeah, I've never heard or seen, other than the Thomas Crown Affair type film, you know, I just didn't think it'd be happening to little old me, you know, in Fitzrovia, but it did, and thankfully we got it back.
GB News.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just gone 10 to 3. More news now out of New Orleans, where multiple people are feared dead after a large truck, a pickup truck, charged through a crowd of partygoers. Emergency officials have said at least 10 people have been killed after this vehicle struck that crowd, celebrating the new year. It all happened just after 3:15 a.m. local time on New Year's Day. The number of injured survivors is suspected to be upwards of 30, and the FBI are now investigating this as an act of terrorism. As reports from American news outlets suggest now the suspect in question is dead. Well, we're getting more information about this all the time. Joining me in the studio is the editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, and the former Labour advisor, Matthew Larser. Charlotte, this is now being treated as terrorism. It looked like a terrorist incident to start with, but we couldn't say that until it was officially declared as such. What do you make of it?
Well, I'm glad they finally confirmed that it's terrorism. It seemed pretty obvious to me. I don't really know why people are so cautious to declare these incidents terrorism incidents, but anyway, they've done it now. I have to say, I'm hoping that Biden will come out and say something. It sounds like he's only just being briefed. I would expect the very least the President of the United States should do is issue some sort of statement via a tweet, if not a video. But we all know, and this is the kind of travesty about America, is that he's not probably capable of it. He's not nimble enough to respond as fast as the news agenda requires him to in these situations. No. But, yeah, well, let's see. He'll be briefed throughout the day.
It is strange that President Biden appeared to not have been woken up when this happened. They waited for him to wake up and then briefed, and we got this statement from the White House saying the President has now been briefed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a bit peculiar. I mean, I think also one thing is that when it first emerged, in fact, when we first saw news reports, which were obviously later on as we were waking up here, it appeared that it was maybe a smaller incident than it was. So it could be that it was only when the full scale of this emerged. I think the use of the word terrorism is really interesting in the American context because it is very different to the British context. Terrorism in the States, when it's an act like this, often means what they call domestic terrorism, which means people with a particular political agenda. We remember the Oklahoma bombing. Often it's people targeting the federal government because there's obviously that kind of anger amongst some people in the States about the federal government, which spills over into some to some extremism. So it'll be interesting to see if that's the case. Who was being targeted? Where people, these were, an African American city and people partying at 3 o'clock in the morning. So one can finish that in one's own head.
Well, Matthew Larser, Charlotte Griffiths, thanks so much for being with us throughout the programme here. Much more to come. Don't go anywhere. Martin Daubney will be continuing your coverage of New Orleans after this.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Over the next few days, things will turn much colder across the UK. There'll be plenty of sunshine around, but some snow and ice in places as well. Low pressure is moving away to the south and east of the UK now, taking wind and rain with it, allowing a northerly airstream to become established across the UK, and this will introduce some wintry hazards as we go through the coming few days. Wet and windy weather then clearing away to the southeast as we go through the evening. Some wintry showers across the central slice of the UK, also easing as we go through the overnight period. So showers becoming mainly confined to areas exposed to the north to northwesterly airstream. And again, those showers will be wintry in places, especially across the hills towards the north, but to some lower levels in places as well. A widespread frost forming, temperatures in towns and cities below freezing, down to -7 or -8 in a few parts of Scotland, and there'll be some ice around to start the day on Thursday as well. So starting Thursday then, further wintry showers moving in from the north into the northern parts of Scotland, a mixture of hail, sleet and some snow in places. Southern parts of Scotland mostly fine to start the day, some clear weather but very chilly here, some frost and some ice in places. A few wintry showers into Northern Ireland, southern parts of Northern Ireland seeing the best of the quieter weather to start the day here. A few showers also across the Irish Sea areas, down across North Sea coastal areas of eastern England, but elsewhere lots of sunshine around, and that's the way of things as we go through Thursday. There will be plenty of sunshine, certainly across inland areas, but it will be a cold day wherever you are with a north to northwesterly wind blowing, and further showers feeding down in that north to northwesterly airstream, particularly into northern Scotland, down across parts of Northern Ireland, the west of England, and down some North Sea coasts at times too. Temperatures are at the very best up to 6 or 7 degrees, but add on the effect of that north to northwesterly wind and feeling close to, if not below freezing in one or two places. As we go into the evening, the showers will tend to become more and more confined to those coasts, so a frost and some ice forming again as we go into the overnight period. Again, a very cold night developing, and we hold on to a mixture of sunshine and wintry showers on Friday, with a risk of some more persistent rain and some snow moving in from the southwest as we go into the weekend. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's still plenty of time to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever, an incredible £50,000. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion? For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, let's speak now to Sales Director at Savills for Quinta Properties, Raquel Santos, who is live for us in Portugal. Raquel, good to see you this morning. Why are all these celebrities flocking to Portugal all of a sudden?
Yeah, I guess it's just because of basically the great lifestyle that we have, security, Portugal has kind of been a hidden, tucked away gem for quite a while that people didn't realize existed. And with the international flights that, with the American flights coming in, it's kind of been put back on the map as a country that's worth visiting and worth investing in due to the secure investments that we offer in real estate.
Raquel, is it anything to do with tax rates? Because I think capital gains tax is, I think if it's over a certain amount, you pay half of your rate, which is 28%. Capital gains on shares and cryptocurrencies is 0. Is it anything to do with that? Because over here in the UK, big storm at the moment about millionaires apparently leaving in exodus because of the mooted increases in taxes in just a few weeks.
Yes, so obviously the alterations that are happening with the UK in terms of the tax that's being implemented on the capital gains, as you mentioned, we've definitely noticed has become a big drive, mostly on the vendor side as well, who are looking to sell because they don't want to be hit, with these higher capital gains, which is close to coming into effect.
Raquel, have you noticed then millionaires, high net worth people from the UK getting in touch with you looking to relocate?
Definitely. It's for multiple reasons, obviously, the changes that are due to come into place, obviously, and Portugal just seems to be a safe option always when things do kind of change. People opt to come into Portugal because we're quite steady, we're quite stable.
GB News, the People's Channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you and a very, very happy new year. It's 2025 and it's 3 p.m. And welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News, bringing you all the very latest up until 6 p.m. We're getting all the latest to the horrific attack in which at least 10 people have now been killed and 35 more injured and hospitalised after a vehicle was driven into a crowd of people in central New Orleans in the early hours of the morning, with the FBI now investigating, as they say, an act of terrorism. And the suspect has now been confirmed to have been eliminated at the scene. And the Prime Minister has this special new message for you.
This government will fight for you.
Well, that was the Prime Minister there, not even bothering to wear a jacket or a tie, delivering his New Year's message. But he also said that the government has plans for more cash in your pocket in 2025. Do you believe it? Do you believe in a Happy New Year, or will it be a nightmare on Downing Street? We'll get all the reaction throughout the show. Last night, over 4,000 farmers, look at that, gloriously lit beacons of hope across the UK to signify the fire is still raging against Labour's inheritance tax raid? Will the farmers force the government into a climb down? Or will ministers plough the same old furrow, leading to potential strikes and even food shortages in 2025? And it's that dreaded day of the year when we all notice the phlegm, the wheezing and the wrinkles. Well, to help you and me, to be honest, get fitter in 2025, we've got a gang of experts to help you shed the pounds, stub out the ciggies and transform you from a couch potato into a hot potato. And that's all coming in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Hope you had a corker last night with your friends, your loved ones, wherever you were, you stayed safe. 2025, what's a year ahead? Politically, we'll take a look back at the political parties' leaders' messages. Kemi Badenoch's was 24 seconds. Seriously, I've done longer burps. You should have more to say if you're a leader of a political party, surely. Sir Keir Starmer says he has a plan for change, says you'll have more money in your pocket. Do you believe that? And meanwhile, Nigel Farage, channeling his inner Donald Trump, has promised to make Britain great again. Let me know what you think about the party's prospects for the year ahead by going to gbnews.com/your say. But now it's time for your Newsday headlines, and it's Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. It's just gone 3 o'clock. These are your headlines. The suspect in the New Orleans attack that killed 10 people today is dead, according to the city's police force. The FBI are investigating this morning's deadly attack as an act of terrorism. At least 35 people have been injured after the man drove a pickup truck into a large crowd on the corner of the popular Bourbon Street in the French Quarter of the city. Local police have been giving an update and saying the pickup driver drove the truck at a very fast pace and it was very intentional behaviour. They said the driver of the vehicle got out and opened fire on police, with 2 officers shot but in a stable condition, while the suspect was declared dead. It happened at around 3 a.m. local time, and people are being asked to stay away from the scene. In other news now, Sir Keir Starmer has hailed 2024 as a year of change as he shared his first New Year message as Prime Minister. Sir Keir declared that the UK will embark on a year of rebuilding and rediscovering the great nation we are in 2025.
Until you can look forward and believe in the promise and the prosperity of Britain again, then this government will fight for you.
But the Conservatives have accused Labour of offering change for the worse, as Kemi Badenoch used her own New Year message to warn that efforts to turn around Tory fortunes would be bumpy.
Happy New Year. Like all of you, I am looking forward to a 2025 that is full of hope, security and prosperity. The Conservative Party is also going through a period of change. This process of renewal will be a long-term project. Things may be bumpy along the way, but the party I now lead is going to do things differently. Watch this space.
Meanwhile, following a stormy New Year's Eve, the wild weather looks set to continue, with London's New Year's Day parade delayed due to high winds forecast. It has now got underway in central London, with thousands of revellers braving the weather. Forecasters are predicting 50-mile-per-hour gusts in London on New Year's Day as wind and rain sparks traffic.